I'm David Keith
I'm Justus Burkett.
and today we're here to find out is Inland Empire the greatest movie ever made?
Damn! This sounds like dialogue from our script.
We were just mumbling in that voice
Yeah.
5 seconds before hitting record.
So you just stuck
kept
with it.
doing it.
You just kept doing
There's
the
no
voice.
reason. This isn't like a hell yeah, brother kind of movie.
No, if anything, it's the accent to do would be Polish.
yes.
Yes, it's the greatest movie ever made. It
Yes.
is definitely not cursed. Will definitely not break your sanity and make you live in nightmare. Yes,
Yes.
it's a very good movie.
It's real nightmares living in 1930s Poland in winter.
Have you ever experienced the harsh life of a Polish prostitute? If not, you consider yourself lucky because it is true nightmare. It is like Dante's Circle of Hell. Yeah.
Movie that is so thoroughly. I didn't even say that right. Welcome to the greatest movie ever made. The show where we watch a movie and tell you if it's the greatest movie ever made. Oh, good one. Good one. I like that.
I love when that guy's making those goblin noises.
Movie that is so thoroughly entertaining, compelling while you're watching it. It's the only thing that matters in the world.
Yeah, that's the Phantom. The Phantom who makes the goblin noises.
The Phantom,
right?
yes.
Yes. Yeah. I big fan of that guy's whole deal. I like when he has the light bulb in his mouth, and I like when he makes those little goblin noises. And I like when he does the scariest fucking thing I've ever seen in the entire world.
Yeah, another one of David Lynch's personification of evil.
And
this time he was like, "What if it was a creepy Polish guy?"
What if I cast the most eerie-looking Polish man I've ever seen and then hit you with a jump scare that'll make you shit your pants when you think about it after leaving the theater?
Bob smells like gasoline. What if the Phantom smells like cheap cologne and bad cigarettes?
This guy has like really rancid vibes.
Yeah.
And I love it. He found some guys with faces, hands even. There's one shot of one of the Polish dudes at the table.
Yeah.
And it's just his hand. It's when he's like he has the gun, right? And he's you just see his hand next to the gun. And this guy's hand looks so no disparagement to this actor who I'm sure is a lovely man. His hand looks so fucked up. I was like, it's just an old guy's hand, but there's something about his nails really small and his fingers are like really wide and sausagey. And I was just like, ooh, he's really good at finding those guys in this movie. Guys whose hands make you uncomfortable to look at.
Yeah, we'll talk about the faces. I'll talk about the faces later because I have thoughts on those.
There's some great faces.
I'm sorry. Justus and I had a conversation before we started this episode. I'm a little out of sorts today.
Yeah.
Because of some personal things that are going on.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if I've introduced our names yet.
I don't think you have.
But I'm David Scandura, joined as always
You're doing great.
by my co-host and for your consideration, Justus Burkett.
Yes, that's me. We
Yeah.
are also joined by a special guest, the squeaky toy that my dog is destroying. So if you're
Fucking me up.
hearing squeaky noises in the background, like you potentially, oh wow, that was
That was
really
a
well
big one.
timed.
Good job.
Um,
You give it to that squeaky toy.
yeah, you. Yeah, people might have heard squeaky noises on our other episodes. Our most recent episode, in fact.
Yeah.
We were talking about this before we turned the mics on, and we hope that you find this cute and not super annoying to listen to. But I'm just gonna leave it in.
Yeah,
I think
it's nice to have some laughs on an episode about a movie that there are funny things at Inland Empire, but I would
Yeah.
argue it is mostly bad vibes.
It is not a great time. This movie is I think quite intentionally a bit of a bummer. Yeah, but also like, yeah, not devoid of humor.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about it. We talked a little bit off mic, but anything that you want to share about how you're doing with the listeners?
I got some family stuff going on right now that's stressing me out.
Yeah.
I have some personal things like I got to get my fucking car fixed.
Yeah,
I got
it's the worst.
bills and shit, money. When there's a repeating motif in this film that I don't know if we'll come back to it later because there's so many things to talk about in this movie. About coming to collect a bill that is past due.
Yeah.
That reminded me that February is shorter than all the other months.
Yeah.
So mentally, I still think it's February, and there
Yes.
are bills that I need to pay
Yes.
because the timeline got shifted around by a couple days because we just decided 1 month is 28 days and maybe sometimes 29 days.
Yeah. Rent and mortgage payments should be less in February.
I agree
than
completely.
they are in the rest because there's less days in it.
Yeah.
Why am I paying the same amount of money? Yeah. But other than that, other than the financial stressors.
Yeah. Other than that, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm finding myself since coming back from New York, like occasionally running into like 48-hour periods where I am very busy,
Yeah.
and then the rest of the week I got fucking dick all to do.
Yep.
And I'm like, is there a way that I can space this out better?
Yes.
So-
Time management. I am fucking abysmal at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as things to recommend, and I've been watching a lot of gun shorts on YouTube, and that has now, I have now gone far enough down the gun rabbit hole that it has led to knife shorts. So now I'm into the knife side of YouTube,
Yeah.
which is less politically sketchy. Like there's definitely parts of there's definitely
Right.
areas of gun shorts on YouTube where I'm like, okay, I can't go back down that road because that road leads to people who really, 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 really like the Second Amendment
Yeah.
and really like cops
Yeah. Yeah.
and don't like
minorities.
trans folks,
Yeah.
and minorities.
Yeah.
That's a tricky water to navigate. But the knife people seem really chill.
Yeah. I'm sure that they are all chill and normal, and none of them have ever done anything weird or bad. A guy who collects knives and makes YouTube shorts about his knife collection, probably a very normal dude.
Despite sort of adjusting my views on guns and gun rights,
Yeah.
ever so slightly in the last few months, I am still pretty firmly like, these need to be regulated better. We need to have better background checks, better protection. We need to investigate gun violence as an epidemic.
Right.
I'm also still firmly on my opinion on knives, where I'm like, no regulations on knives.
Anyone should be able to have a knife. The government should provide you a knife.
Yes, open carry knives, open carry swords.
Open carry swords is a fun idea.
If I ever hear about a mass stabbing,
Yeah.
I would be like, that. I would be the guy who's like, the only way to stop a bad guy with a knife is a good guy
Good
with a
guy
knife.
with a knife. Yeah. Just knife fights.
I think it would be a safer and more fun world with more knives.
Just if, someone starts... So someone pulls out a knife and tries to start some mayhem in public, and then you just have a public knife fight.
Yeah.
To settle it. It's like, may the best knife fighter prevail, I guess.
Yeah.
If I saw a guy in the grocery store walking around with like a sword in his belt, that would alarm me so much less than seeing someone with a gun on their belt.
Yeah.
Which I see all the time because
Yeah.
we live in Arizona,
Mhm.
right? There's just people at the store. There's people at Starbucks with fucking guns and shit. And I'm always a little like thrown by that. I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, I don't want to be seeing this thing that could kill me just in this like very public and it just feels like the context of the weapon in the setting is out of place, and it kind of throws me out of whack. Don't think I would have that reaction to a sword.
I think you're right. I think I would be like, oh, this is a wandering Ronin.
I'd be like, this guy's
stopping
cool
at
as
the
fuck.
grocery store to collect some chips on his journey.
Like, I want to be friends with this guy. I don't want to be friends with the guy who has the 9mm on his
He's
belt.
confident.
Yeah.
He's
just
sure of himself.
cool
He's
interests.
cool and level-headed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
On a more serious note, it's up for Best Picture, which we're watching the Oscars tonight, so who knows if it'll win. Nickel Boys,
Yeah.
which actually feels like a kind of an interesting pairing with Inland Empire, because they're both very sensory and focused on images and memories and dreams.
Yeah.
So Nickel Boys just deals with things in a little bit more of a concrete way, where Inland Empire goes much more abstract with it.
Yeah.
Just a powerful, moving film about youth and racism and the cruelties and sins of our past. And I was blown away by it, and I think it's an incredible movie, and you should watch it.
I really want to see it. I haven't gotten around to that one yet, but definitely on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah. Don't really have much interesting to report, but I'm chilling. I'm vibing. And yeah, the only recommendation that I really have is there's a punk album that came out a little earlier this year called Who Let the Dogs Out by Lambrini Girls. And I just re-listened to it yesterday. I had given it a listen, a month or so ago when it came out. But I just re-listened to it yesterday, and it just reminded me how good that album is. It's like, kind of Riot Girl punk. They're British, a British band. And just like fun, kind of snarky, sneering lyrics that are kind of lampooning various bad behaviors and shitty politics and stuff. They have a song about police brutality. They have a song about being a woman in the workplace. They have a song about bisexuality. Like it's just all like, and they kind of approach each of them with this kind of irreverent attitude, and the music's good. So yeah, check out Who Let the Dogs Out by Lambrini Girls. Good album. I also watched Sonora. Good movie. Don't really have much to say about that other than today is the Oscars, the day that we're recording this, and can I just congratulate Sean Baker Sonora on the Best Picture win. Congratulations.
It seems like it's gonna be that.
Maybe. We'll see.
I liked Sonora not as much as everyone else.
Yeah.
I was sort of having a really good time with it, and then at a point I was just like, can I get off the ride now?
I liked the I don't know, the Sean Baker of it all, I guess.
I've never seen anything that he's done either, so like
the only other one I've seen is Florida Project. But between the two movies, he just has like kind of a specific focus that I really like. He focuses a lot on the interiority of people on the margins of society, right? Being like, what's it really like to be like one of these people that we like largely as people with privilege like don't necessarily think about, right? And that's one of the things that spoke to me a lot about it, and that's a big time happening in the Florida Project as well. So anyway, but yeah. Unless we have anything else to say about Anora or Nickel Boys or Gun YouTube.
There's these folding shotguns that they have where you break it apart and it folds literally like the barrel folds back like 180 degrees.
Yeah.
And you can load it and carry it unfolded.
Uh-huh.
And then they like whip it locked and then they shoot it off.
Yeah.
Those are pretty sick.
But you can't shoot it when it's folded.
No.
Because then you would just shoot yourself.
Right.
Which would be funny if you could do that.
But the mechanism doesn't work that way. But you can literally just fold up the shotgun, load it, and then like do a trick and like whip it open like people would flick a knife open.
That's fun.
And shoot it off. Those are pretty sick. Yeah.
That's fun. A movie that also has a gun in it. Wow,
Single
look at
gun.
that transition.
This isn't John. If it was John Wick,
Yeah.
I feel like gun talk would be a lot better suited to something like John Wick, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
just
yeah.
gun porn
Right.
at points.
This movie has one gun.
It's a single gun.
Um,
I don't know what kind of gun it is. I was going to look it up.
I don't either. It's a handgun of some kind.
David Lynch's
Yes.
Inland Empire.
David Lynch's Inland Empire. David Keith Lynch recently departed.
Mhm.
And this is the first Lynch film that we are covering post his untimely death. But it's the second Lynch film that we've covered.
Yes.
We also did Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. I was gonna say interesting second one to do. I kind of think out of his filmography, there's no uninteresting order to tackle it in. If we tackled his movies in release order, that's interesting. If you kind of like pick and choose, it's interesting. You know, like it's just like there's no way to approach his filmography where you're not going to be like, huh.
Yeah, and when around the time that he passed away, I had started rewatching Twin Peaks. And with his passing, I knew that like we should cover another Lynch movie, just because I was, even before he had passed, when I was rewatching Twin Peaks, I was like, I'm seeing this story and I'm seeing this creator in a different light
Yeah.
than I did a few years ago. And then revisited Fire Walk with Me and saw that in a different light. And I had sort of thought that like I was going to catch up on all of the Lynch that I was missing, which is Straight Story, Mulholland Drive, and Lost Highway,
Yeah.
and The Return, before we get to this. But I sort of like that there's still more to explore.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do Inland Empire because it was just like, I don't know. You had been mentioning you wanted to see it. I had been thinking about seeing it.
Yeah.
It seems like a big one. It seems like an important one. It seems like people sort of are starting to, like, I think for a while, Blue Velvet was like his quintessential masterpiece.
Yeah. Or
It
Mulholland Drive, depending on who you
And
ask it.
I feel like people are now shifting towards like his late career stuff, like Mulholland Drive, and this and The Return
Yeah.
are sort of his like his masterpieces
Yeah.
or his quintessential films. But people would also say that about Eraserhead, you know, like
Right.
he has such a varied and interesting idiosyncratic filmography that I think any way that we approach it is worth doing, I think.
Yeah. This movie for me, like you mentioned, I had sort of a draw towards this one specifically. This was both of our first time seeing it.
Yeah.
The thing that always kind of was alluring to me about this one, well, there's two things. One, the fact that this was shot on like a standard def camcorder was always just interesting to me. I was like, I want to see what a David Lynch movie shot that way looks like, right? And then also, I knew that I didn't know much about the plot of this movie, which I think was good, going into it not knowing very much about what it is about. But I did know that it was about a cursed movie, and I was like, I love creepypasta shit, as people know. I love haunted media is just a trope that I like a lot, like in horror. And I was like, ooh, a David Lynch movie that's like about like one of my favorite horror tropes, which it kind of is and kind of isn't. You know, that plays into the movie, but it's not the focus of the movie. But that's just knowing that was part of this movie is one of the things where I was like, well, that's got to be the next one I watch.
Mm-hmm.
was the one about the cursed movie. It's interesting seeing this one at kind of a point where I'm like disconnected from my big Lynch run where I watched most of the rest of the stuff from him that I've seen. It's sort of interesting that I've like taken a little bit of a Lynch break, more or less, in terms of watching stuff that was new to me from him, because I've rewatched like Eraserhead and Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me and stuff, but the first time watches of his stuff that I did were mostly like when I was in college and then like right out of college, and coming at this older and maybe, you know, slightly more informed about cinema as an art form in general, just as I consume more of it, right? I'm kind of glad I waited.
Yeah.
I'm sort of like, if I had watched this movie in 2015 when I watched Blue Velvet, I don't know that I would have had the same reaction to it as I did waiting and being like a more fully formed adult with like more clear opinions about art and like a more developed sense of my own like personal taste. I'm sort of happy to have arrived at this specific Lynch film at this specific point in my life.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I think that I would even go so far as to say that if we had talked about this in December 2023 with Val instead of Twin Peaks, because she had said that she was thinking about making us watch this, I think I would have reacted to it very differently back then.
Yeah.
Even. And even if I had watched this, a couple months ago before Lynch had passed, like I think since Lynch passed away, I was rewatching Twin Peaks. I rewatched Fire Walk with Me, rewatched Blue Velvet, and then watched Eraserhead for the first time with you, watched Wild at Heart for the first time on my own. Like, Lynch has been on my mind, and I've been drifting in and out of his filmography. That I think, like, by pure happenstance, I think watching it this morning at 9:00, I basically woke up and put on Inland Empire.
Sorry. I also did this. I did this too. I woke up this morning and just immediately put on the movie because we knew we were recording this afternoon, and it's a 3-hour movie. So both of us basically rolled out of bed and put this movie on.
Yeah.
What a fucking insane way to start a day.
That's a crazy way to start a Sunday.
Do you feel fucking crazy right now? Because I feel like
it would have been more normal for me to go to church. And I haven't done that in a while.
I truly feel a little disconnected from reality right now because I started my day watching this movie. Like, I kind of stood up after the movie ended and wandered aimlessly around my kitchen and living room for about 15 minutes. And then I was like, okay, fuck, I have things to do. I have to go to the grocery store. But for there was a second after the movie ended where I'm like, where am I? Like, what is happening? Who am I? And I think it's because I went from a state of unconsciousness directly into the world of this film. Highly recommend. You've heard of Wake and Bake? This will provide you similar results. Just wake up and immediately watch Inland Empire.
Yeah.
And you will feel fucking insane for the rest of the day. We should talk about the movie itself.
One would hope that we do that on a podcast about the movie.
It's hard to do that.
This is hard. It's I think there is we can go through this roughly chronologically.
Yeah.
But particularly in the second act of this film, well into the third act, things become very fractured and surreal. And
yes.
The any sense of a narrative through line is sort of lost.
Yeah, and it also chronologically is well, how do you define chronologically, right? Because it's if you're talking about the events in the order in which they happen for the characters in the movie, that is totally unclear.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know when things happen. We see things that happen and understand that they're connected and understand that some things happen before or after other things. But in terms of there's not really a clear idea of how the characters in this movie go from point A to point B, So when we're talking chronologically, I guess we would have to define it in what order does the movie show you things?
Right.
Yeah. Sorry not to...
That's what I fucking meant. You moron. You giant idiot. You nerd.
The look that David gave me when I just did that, I can only describe as withering. This is going great. This is going great.
It's like if we're talking about Memento, we're not going to talk about the end of Memento first, right?
I mean,
I've never seen Memento.
I
just picked that. Or Pulp Fiction.
yeah. But
Okay.
the end of this movie is the beginning of this movie.
Yeah, sort of.
Anyway, so the movie's weird and it's also very good.
Here's my question.
Yeah.
I guess we'll start with this.
Yeah.
I have heard this described as to some people, his most difficult film.
Yeah.
You've seen The Return.
Yeah.
And you've seen Mulholland Drive, which I've not seen.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple others that you haven't seen either.
Yes, you've seen Straight Story, which I haven't.
I
Or
have
not Straight Story. You've seen Wild at Heart, which I haven't seen.
Yeah, and I've seen Dune.
Great.
Would you agree that this is the most difficult Lynch that you've seen so far?
I think for me, I would say that The Return I find more difficult, quote unquote, or challenging.
Right.
But it's like, I guess for me, the way that I think about that, because here's the thing. I don't think any of Lynch's movies that I have seen are like incomprehensible. I think people who talk about Lynch as if his art cannot be understood, right, are full of shit. I think that he never presents you something that doesn't have a narrative. All of his stuff that I have seen has a narrative. There is a story, right? And it's usually pretty easy to follow. And I think the idiosyncratic stuff that is like his hallmark is in service of his stories.
Right.
I think like a lot of what shows up on screen that makes you go, huh, right? And you're kind of puzzling out images or, the way that characters are behaving or speaking or whatever. A lot of the time, the point of those things is to elevate the emotions in the narrative, right? And so, like, I think difficult for me is just like the most packed full of those moments that reinforce the sort of emotional beats of the narrative, the moments, right?
Yeah.
And I think The Return has the densest amount. Like, it is most densely packed with those moments.
Okay.
So I would say that's the most difficult.
Yeah.
To me, I don't know. Would you say Inland Empire is the most difficult Lynch film that you've seen? Whatever that means to you. It doesn't mean to mean the same thing that it means to me.
I asked you that question, not sure what my answer was.
Yeah.
Just to stall more time before I actually give you an answer. The moments. I think those people who think Lynch is just nonsense, they get hung up on those moments and never connect to the emotional through line that's running through his work that those are supposed to supplement.
Right. Because they're because in my opinion, they're fixated on the meaning of those moments. And it's like the point is not meaning, the point is feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that happened for me during our Fire Walk With Me episode, where there were plenty of times where you and Val would talk for 5 or 10 minutes about your theories and ideas around a certain image or symbol or moment in the movie, whether that was narrative or thematic. And then you would turn to me and I would just kind of throw my arms up and go, I don't fucking know. So,
which, by the way, is a perfectly valid way to respond to Lynch.
Absolutely.
Just, I don't know.
I think I was intellectualizing Fire Walk With Me too much.
Yeah.
Rather than feeling it.
Yeah.
And I think while this movie is 3 hours long, very surreal, difficult to parse at points, there's long stretches of this movie that I could see someone characterizing as boring. I think I felt this one more than I did Fire Walk With Me that first time that I saw it.
Yeah.
So in a way, yes, I think this is the most difficult complex Lynch film.
Yeah.
But I had a better time with it than I would have expected.
Awesome.
And we'll elucidate on that more as we go.
Yeah.
Elucidate. Have I ever used that word in a sentence? I don't know.
I don't know.
We'll talk about it as we go on.
Mr. Dictionary
Yeah.
over here. Fucking. Yeah, the movie opens with ambient sound and a beam of light.
I knew you were going to talk about the title sequence.
Shoots into
Because the title
frame.
sequence is cool. And it's going to be one of those where like Justus thinks the title sequence is cool.
It illuminates the giant text, Inland Empire. And the title card's cool.
Yeah. I noticed.
Fuck me, I guess.
Yeah.
I liked the title card. What do you want?
As I've been rewatching, as I've been watching Lynch since he passed away,
Yeah.
I started noticing that like he has a similar font
Yeah.
for all his movies, like it's sort of his Carpenter font.
Yeah.
And I was surprised that this didn't start with the same font that he uses in like Blue Velvet and Fire Walk with Me and Wild at Heart.
Yeah.
But so there's this whole Polish thing going on in this movie.
Yes. So much of this movie both was shot in and takes place in Poland.
So this opening sequence is centered around a Polish sex worker.
She's credited as like Lost Girl. Yeah.
And is being one of her clients is harassing her, and then at one point she turns on the TV and is watching this sitcom with people in rabbit costumes.
Yes.
Which I'm assuming must just this comes up throughout the movie. I'm assuming this is just footage that he took from his short film Rabbits.
I think it is. Yes.
Like I haven't watched it, but
yeah,
it's sort of interesting that he decided to go back to that and use it so much throughout this movie.
Yes, one of these rabbits is voiced by Naomi Watts.
Yeah.
Which I like. I just like that factoid. She's watching this rabbit sitcom and crying. This is an image we return to multiple times in the movie. Is the lost girl sitting in this hotel room or apartment in Poland watching the TV. Sometimes it's rabbits, sometimes she's seeing something else, and she is crying basically every time we see her watching the TV. The thought that I had the most about this opening, and about when we return to the lost girl throughout the movie, is I was thinking about I was thinking about the Panos Cosmatos movie Mandy, and how there's the scene after.
Was that because you're always thinking about the Panos Cosmatos movie, Mandy?
You mean my favorite movie in the entire world? The best movie that anyone has ever made in the history of cinema? Yes, I'm always thinking about it. But yeah, there's a moment in Mandy, I don't want to spoil Mandy, but there's a moment in Mandy where the worst possible thing imaginable happens to Nicolas Cage's character. And then right after that, he walks inside his house and there's a very silly and surreal commercial on the TV. And there's a drawn out moment of him just watching this commercial in shock. And just like totally disconnected from reality. I was thinking about this when I was watching the scenes with the Lost Girl, because what happens right before we see her watching Rabbits is she has this kind of unpleasant interaction with this client, right? And her face is blurred out during that part. Mm-hmm. Like she's disassociating. And we see her, it's a close-up on her blurred face, but the motion implies that maybe she's undergoing some kind of sexual assault, right? And then after that, like, then she's watching Rabbits and crying, right? And Rabbits is so weird and surreal. Like the rabbit characters speak almost exclusively in non sequiturs. There's like canned laughter that comes in at totally seemingly random points, right? And I kind of, what I was getting from this was it was kind of like, oh, this is the experience of someone who is like in shock and has experienced like major trauma. And now she's like trying to engage with like something that should be comforting, like a TV multicam sitcom, right? And because of what has happened to her, the thing that is supposed to be comforting is alienating. It's like, oh, this is like grotesque to me now because I'm like in this place where I've experienced this traumatic event. A lot like that scene in Mandy. I don't know. Like that's where my brain was every time we saw The Lost Girl. I was like, oh, this is like her reckoning with what has happened to her. You
Yeah.
know?
I have different thoughts on that. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Well,
I-
the beautiful thing about Lynch is nobody's right. Right? Because
Yeah.
he just like he gives you the images and is like, interpret this however. Like I'm
Yeah.
not going to tell you what it means.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
No, you know, a lot of his films deal with suburbia and the dark underbelly of suburbia.
Yeah.
And I think a thing that people get wrong about Lynch, or perhaps misinterpret about Lynch, is they see some of that stuff as like only just like sharp, biting satire.
Yeah.
But rewatching Twin Peaks and rewatching Blue Velvet,
Yeah.
he loves that idealized fairy tale version of America.
Yes.
And it's a dream that has become unattainable because of the darkness and the evil in the world and bad and human nature.
Yes.
It's because of the Frank Booths of the world and the Bobs of the world that we are not able to live in sunny Lumberton and Twin Peaks.
right.
And I think that same view of suburbia is in Inland Empire as well. But it might be the movie that I've seen from him where he is critiquing it and satirizing it the most.
Yeah.
Because to me, I'm the lost girl watching rabbits is her dreaming of a life of domesticity.
Yeah.
And the perfect sitcom nuclear family sort of life. Even though she's a Polish girl, she has that
Yeah.
whatever the American dream is,
Right.
like
Well, the American dream, it's like kind of our biggest export.
Yeah.
We multinational corporations that were like born and strengthened in the U.S. essentially like colonize the economies and cultures of the entire planet, right? And it's like in a very real way, we're just like exporting the idea of the American dream, which at its fundamentally is just capitalist fan fiction,
Right.
right? So yeah, and so it's like. Yeah, I like that. And I like that even in Rabbits, like they're speaking English, even though she's watching it on Polish TV, because it is like this is like an American cultural export.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and to her, this sitcom reads as like, it's like just like she's Audrey in Little Shop of Horrors, like she's dreaming of that.
Yeah, someplace that's green.
So that nice quiet home life with a husband and kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, a really interesting opening to this film.
Yes. And I also think the opening is very important because this is a thing that I don't want to spend too much time talking about, but I think it's important to touch on early. The movie is, as we said, shot on standard definition digital, right? And there are points in this movie where the image, I think, very intentionally looks unpleasant. There are lots of points in this movie where the image looks like shit on purpose. I think the opening is really important because the other thing that Lynch manages to do with this format is he manages to create extremely beautiful and very striking images in standard definition digital. And I think both of them he deploys really intentionally. This opening sequence with the Lost Girl, I think, is very beautiful digital photography. The whole part with the blurred faces and that bit's in black and white is like very visually striking. And then when we see the girl sitting on the bed wrapped in the blanket, that image is also very beautiful. It's a very well composed image and it looks great. And I think it's very important to start with that, because that's Lynch letting you know this movie can look good when it wants to. So when it doesn't, I'm telling you something through that.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think the other thing about this is, in something like Blue Velvet, Lynch explores voyeurism, kind of a Hitchcockian
Yeah.
look at voyeurism and our desire to see things that maybe we shouldn't be seeing. And the opening with the blurred faces between the lost girl and her client. I think the client is the Phantom. There's so many ugly looking Polish dudes in this movie that I'm not entirely sure.
Well, I think his face is blurred too, so we can't really.
But I couldn't remember if it was unblurred at some
I
point
don't
in this
remember.
beginning.
Yeah.
It's but it looks like a sex tape. Like it
Yes.
looks like someone. It looks like evidence.
Right.
Um.
And the way that he's speaking to her too
Yeah.
does also have very like this is like I stumbled onto the wrong corner of X videos and now I'm seeing some weird Eastern European pornography that I'm like, was this made legally? Maybe I should watch something else.
No, you wouldn't find that stuff on X videos,
That's
my
true.
friend.
Yeah, you'd have to dive deeper than that.
Yeah.
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 Anyway,
I'm well familiar with X videos, extensive video library,
connoisseur of
and
X
I've
videos.
never seen anything quite like that.
Can
on
I
there.
briefly take us off topic to sidebar on something that I think you'll find amusing?
Sure.
I was at the Arizona Renaissance Fair yesterday, and Bree and I were. I'm gonna have to bleep that. Haven't had to do that in a while.
Wow.
High Priestess Pod and I we kept seeing this guy who was he was like 6'3" and jacked. He was like a huge bodybuilder monster of a man, wearing a shirt that was probably 2 sizes too small, which just made him look even more jacked. The shirt had proudly just like 2/3 of the shirt was emblazoned with the Brazzers logo. and High Priestess Pod and I kept seeing this guy. We kept like, as we were wandering around the fair, we would be like, there he is again. And we just started getting like so amped. And by the end of the day, we were this guy's biggest fans, because we were like, that is so baller to just go out in public in a place where there are like families and shit, proudly just displaying like, I enjoy pornography. I am an enthusiast. I am a fan of the production company Brazzers Entertainment.
See, I think I'm more like, I am least scared of the guy in the grocery store with the sword on his hip, most scared of the guy in Starbucks with a gun on his hip, and I'm not sure how I feel about the guy with the Brazzers logo.
High Priestess Pod just...
I might head for the door.
High Priestess Pod just texted me to remind me of one of the most important parts of this for us, which is that he was also there with his extremely attractive girlfriend. which just adds another layer of it. It's like, not only am I a huge fan of pornography, but also, you know, I'm a family man. Like, I'm here with the lady. And she's fine with it. She knows what the shirt means. We're all cool with this. Which I think makes him a little less threatening. I think if it was just a guy by himself,
Yeah.
you'd be like, huh? But he had like his lady with him, and she was like very, very good looking, you know? And I was just like, this guy seems like he's living the dream. Anyway, High Priestess Pod's contribution is king.
So shout out to that guy.
Yes. Shout out to Brazzers guy. Anyway. Sorry, X videos was mentioned, and that jogged my memory.
It's fine.
About King Brazzers at the Renaissance Festival. Anyway, yeah, so then after this opening, we're making a movie.
Yeah.
Laura Dern is first Laura Dern's at home.
And Grease Zabriskie wanders in.
Grace Zabriskie is the best actress that has ever lived. Her scene in this movie is it was the moment where the movie fully just got its hooks in me, and I was just like, oh, what the fuck is going on? because she is wild in this movie. She's like doing this Polish accent, and the part of it is the way that Lynch is shooting her.
Sure.
Because the camera is like, it seems like inches from her face.
Yeah, Lynch is shooting in extreme close-ups to the point where the face sort of becomes distorted. Our sense of where the camera is in actual space is distorted. The geography of the scene becomes mixed up a little bit. This is what I wanted to talk about with faces.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of good-looking people, good faces in this movie.
Oh man, so
and
many.
Lynch loves showing them off.
Class faces in this movie.
And this was a moment where I was reminded of Sergio Leone.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Sergio Leone, we haven't talked about him yet on the show. Loved faces, loves people's imperfections, and stuff like that. So he would often shoot these like beautiful, gorgeous wide shots, and then juxtapose that with a really tight close up, and that's how you get like the squinting and the stuff from like the Western duels and shit like that.
Yeah,
this has a similar fascination with the human face, where Lynch loves poring over all of the bumps and the pores and the crow's feet and the details. You see, I think it is Grace Zabriskie. If not, it's Laura Dern. There was one shot where I noticed like the red veins in the eyes really prominently.
You know what I was really noticing big time? Teeth.
Mm-hmm.
This movie is obsessed with teeth. It is like almost every extreme close-up of an actor, I was just like fixated on their teeth, because he is shooting so close to their mouths that I was like, I never knew Jeremy Irons' teeth looked like that, you know? And it's just, and he holds on them so long. And in this scene with Grace Zabriskie, when they were going back between Laura Dern and Grace Zabriskie, every time that the reverse shot happened, the first thing that I was drawn to every time was their mouths. And I think I think it's intentional. I also think that this movie is obsessed with Laura Dern's mouth.
Yeah.
This is a movie about Laura Dern's mouth. But I fully agree with what you're saying about the fixation on faces.
Yeah.
And I think whereas in a Sergio Leone movie, which, to be fair, you are well versed and I am not,
mm-hmm.
we might be using that to kind of like wring some dramatic tension, some character out of it. We're doing that in this movie. I also think that unlike the obsession with the face as an entry point to the humanity of the characters, I kind of feel like Lynch is intentionally alienating with the way that he fixates on faces in this movie. He sort of wants you to look at another human being and get that uncanny valley thing that you get, that usually you only get from representations of human faces that are a little wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just shooting people's actual faces in a way that makes them look a little wrong. And it does sort of alienate you from the characters, where you're like, oh, I don't like looking at this person.
Well, that's the camcorder effect.
Yes.
Because the camcorder is slightly distorting all those features.
And the digital noise, too.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, and so for me, it is like sifting through that digital noise to find the human being underneath. And this scene drew me in immediately, like it did for you too.
The thing in this scene that ties into the last thing you said, for me, is the point at which I noticed that Laura Dern was perfectly in focus and Grace Zabriskie isn't. The shot of Grace Zabriskie, her face is a little out of focus, but Laura Dern is perfectly in focus. And I was like, oh, okay, that is, first of all, clearly absolutely intentional. And also, now that I've noticed it, it is freaking me the fuck out every time I look at that shot of Grace Zabriskie, because I'm like, why is she wrong? Like, why is she out of focus? Like, this is deeply, primally unsettling to me. And what she's saying is creepy as fuck.
Yeah. So yeah, she says that she's her neighbor.
Yeah.
And is coming to visit, and then sits down and tells her this these two scary, terrifying stories. And there's a point when Laura Dern asks her where she lives, and she says, just down the way. I'm in the forest.
In the brick house.
In the brick house.
It's very hard to see from the road.
Yeah. And previous to this, we have actually watched Grace Zabriskie wander down the street, and it's clear that this is a nice, rich Hollywood Hills neighborhood.
It's like full-on mansions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when she's talking about living in the woods in this brick house, my brain goes, sort of jokingly, so she's a witch.
A fairy tale witch.
And so here's my question for you, Justice.
Yeah.
Is this movie about a witch cursing a princess?
Yes. I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't thought of like the cursing a princess. Like I hadn't thought of Laura Dern as Cinderella or as Sleeping Beauty.
Snow White or something.
Yes. I had not thought of that. I had thought of this is a wicked witch from this is the Baba Yaga, right? Not to be confused with the Baba Yaga John Wick. The Baba Yaga. But
what if John Wick just showed up and shot all those Polish guys?
It's the end scene. It's at the end of the movie, and the Phantom's in the hallway. But then instead of Laura Dern, it's just John Wick shooting the Phantom. or Laura Dern's in the hallway. She goes into room 47, and it's just John Wick in there. And he's like, yeah. Anyway. No. Yeah. The witch thing, I think, is very intentional, especially when we later learn that the movie that Laura Dern is making is based on an old Polish folktale that is cursed, right? And it very much, I was getting big time fairy tale, bedtime story, but twisted and fucked up and through an adult lens in this entire movie. Yes, absolutely. I love the idea that Laura Dern is the princess because she's here in her castle at the beginning of the movie. She has all her servants, and and this magical old, not to be rude to Grace Zabriskie, but the movie portrays her more or less this way. Old crone comes and is like, hey, you better watch out or you're going to learn a lesson. Yeah. Kind of. Yeah. And the thing that is really interesting to me in this conversation and ties very much into narratively into the movie is when she starts talking about time, right? And she says something about if it was tomorrow, then you wouldn't know that you had a bill that was overdue today, which would then be yesterday, right? Or whatever. And she's just talking in these weird kind of riddles. She says something about it being 9:45. If it was 9:45, you wouldn't even know it was past midnight.
Mm-hmm.
There's something like that too. And then the times 9:45 and midnight come up multiple times again later in the movie. So there's just it feels like this conversation is setting the ground rules in much the same way that Lil does at the beginning of Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, where the two agents see the Blue Rose lady do her funny little dance. Yeah. And then Gordon Cole's like, here's what all this shit means. Right? It feels like this conversation is doing the same thing, where it's this is the code that the rest of the movie will be talking.
Yeah, this is we're setting up the internal logic that the movie is operating on, whether or not you understand it or not. Yeah. The movie understands it and Lynch understands it. Yeah. But it's also a code for this is how you need to watch the rest of the movie. Yeah. This is whatever mindset you have in this scene, this is what's going to make or break the rest of the film for you.
And the way this scene ends is important, which is Grace Zabriskie, one of the last things she says is if you were you tomorrow, you would be sitting over there. And then Laura Dern turns her head. And then we see her get the role in the movie, and it seems like this is her the next day, right? But it seems like it's a little unclear whether she turns her head and sees this, or whether she turns her head, sees something else, and then we cut to her getting the part, right? I love how the language of this movie just makes it impossible to know, right? Because it's the scene with her accepting the role, getting the call from her agent, that could be past before the Grace Zabriskie scene. It could also be the next day, it seems like it's being told to us. It could also be something else, Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, she gets the role. One part of the scene that made me laugh is, well, first of all, she just picks up the phone and she just says Greg over and over again.
Greg.
And then bursts into joy and tears and laughing. And then we see her butler clasp his hands together and kick his little back leg up. That was funny as shit.
Classic Lynch thing where he's just like,
What if this guy did this funny little thing?
yeah, I really like that moment too, where he does the little leg kick. Yeah, and the movie's being directed by Jeremy Irons, who is not in a lot of this movie, but fucking rules.
This movie loves to just be like, oh, and this actor's in the movie now.
Yeah.
Moving on. That's how we're introduced to Jeremy Irons, where it's just suddenly a close-up of Jeremy Irons.
Yeah, suddenly you're just looking at every single individual tooth that Jeremy Irons has in his mouth.
Suddenly a 10-second shot of William H. Macy.
Yeah, welcome back to the show, William H. Macy. As guy who's barely in this movie. He's just credited as announcer. Yeah, so she gets the part. And she's there's stuff in this early portion that is like more kind of narratively linear, where she like goes on the talk show, where the lady who hosts the talk show is like being weirdly inappropriate,
Right.
About Laura Dern, whose character name is Nikki. And her co-star Devin, played by Justin Theroux, another Lynch favorite. He loves putting that guy in movies.
What else is he in?
Mulholland Drive.
Okay, for me it was like, oh, it's the guy from the business card scene in American Psycho. It's one of Patrick Bateman's Wall Street buddies.
Yeah.
In American Psycho.
Yeah, he's also in Mulholland Drive, and he fucking rules in Mulholland Drive. He gets cucked by Billy Ray Cyrus in Mulholland Drive.
Oh man.
Yeah, like Billy Ray. He walks in on Billy Ray Cyrus actively fucking his wife. It's very funny.
Get me the man who sang "Achy Breaky Heart."
I love that song.
Billy Ray, would you like to be in my movie Mulholland Drive?
Listen, what you're gonna do is you're really giving it to her, and then Justin walks in, and then you act like he's your best buddy in the whole world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very funny. Anyway, yeah, Justin Theroux. I love Justin Theroux in this movie.
He's great. Jeremy Irons is great.
Yeah.
And the movie sort of forgets about the both of them, which I would love to see more of them in this movie, but what they have is really, really good.
I think it's important for the success of the movie as a whole that we do drop them.
Yeah.
For a reason that will become clear.
Yeah. But there's sort of tension in this opening about her and Justin Theroux being cast together, and like, are they going to start an affair during the course of this movie?
Apparently this actor Devin has a bit of a reputation for on-set romances. So he apparently is a little bit of a dog, and his kind of people that he surrounds himself with, his team, are really giving it to him and being like, you can't fuck this one. We know your game, bro. And he's like, no, it's not like that. She's like a real professional.
And he does a really good job playing this role ambiguously enough that you can interpret, everything that he says whatever way you want.
This is the thing I really like about him in this movie, is I really like that you are kind of taken with him. You're kind of charmed by him. You're like, oh, this guy's kind of funny. He seems like a good hang. And at the same time, you're like, this guy also could be a total creep and a scumbag, and he's just really good at hiding it. He's like, he's injecting enough of that energy where you're like, I don't trust this guy at all, but I like also kind of like him. That's the thing about his performance that I think is so good. And their like banter that they have it's both effective at setting up what it needs to set up, which is like their kind of textual romance in the film within the film is sort of bleeding into their real lives. And also I think it's just like good shit to see the two of them kind of play off of each other. And it seems like they're having fun.
Yeah. I love the scene when they're doing the table read.
Yeah.
And just watching them act in character as the characters within the film.
Yes.
They have really, really great chemistry. Laura Dern cries on camera. We see it happen in real time.
Yeah. Laura Dern's crying.
Laura Dern's crying so much throughout this movie.
Yes.
How do you feel about Laura Dern as an actor overall?
I love her. I love her. I haven't seen her in as much stuff as I would like. She, for me, other than like, I guess including Blue Velvet, is just one of those actresses who kind of pops up in stuff that I am interested in for other reasons, right? Like I saw her in Last Jedi, and I was like, oh, Laura Dern's in this, awesome, you know? And like as a kid, I obviously knew her as the lady from Jurassic Park,
right?
You know, but I feel like I've never like done a real Dern deep dive, and I think I'm overdue on that because I really, really love her every time she shows up. And obviously I've seen Blue Velvet, which she's also in. Smaller role in that one. I think she is a tour de force in this movie. And I think if anything has pushed me over the edge to seek out movies because she is in them, it is now this movie.
Okay.
I think she is incredible. Both in general and specifically in this movie. Yeah. How are you feeling about Dern?
I think I've come to appreciate Laura Dern more and more, but in the past it was like, oh yeah, Jurassic Park lady.
Right.
She was one of the weaker points of that film for me at, a certain time in my life. And I had probably seen her in a couple other things. She sort of struck me as like the type of actor that maybe my mom would really like. Like my mom would really like Laura Dern.
Yeah.
But as I've watched her more and more in like Last Jedi and then rewatching Lynch because she's in Wild at Heart. She's great in Wild at Heart. She's great in Blue Velvet, and those are two very different characters.
Yeah.
Watching this, I think this is my favorite role that I've seen her in.
Yeah, me too.
I was really, really impressed with this.
Yeah.
And part of it is just the amount of time she has to cry on screen and like emote, and how much of this movie is hinging on you empathizing with her.
Yeah. And
relating to her as all of this strange, surreal stuff is happening to her, and she's like lost in this nightmare.
Yeah.
I was transfixed by Laura Dern in this film.
Yeah.
And I think the table read scene is really what started that for me. Where I was like, oh, this is going to be a journey. Also, another great thing about this table read scene, just Harry Dean Stanton lighting up a fucking cigarette.
And just being there, man.
Just hanging out.
God, I love that guy. Harry Dean Stanton fucking rules in this movie. In this table read scene, there's a part where, because this is basically where we get the lore drop about the cursed movie production, right? Because so what has happened is the producers of the movie within the movie know that the project has a dark history that they have not shared with the director, who is Jeremy Irons, or with the leads, right? And so Jeremy Irons has learned this through Harry Dean Stanton, who's like his assistant or whatever, right? And he he leads into this thing being like, oh, there was this German production of this movie called 47, and the leads died, and that movie was based on an old Polish folktale that is supposedly cursed, right? So that's the whole thing. But when he leads into this explanation, he says, if you have an assistant who can hold their liquor, you can learn anything, basically. Implying that, like, Harry Dean Stanton just took the producers out and got fucking plastered, and they, like, spilled their guts to him. And Harry Dean Stanton, I don't even remember the line that he has, but he's basically, Jeremy Irons is like, yeah, if you have a guy who can, like, drink anybody under the table, and Harry Dean Stanton's like, yeah, that's what I do. It's just so awesome.
Yeah,
his energy is...
I would not get into a drinking contest with Harry Dean Stanton.
Absolutely not. The only worst you could do is a cigarette smoking contest. Yeah, he rocks in this movie. Just his specific energy, his specific presence is indispensable in this role as it is in every role I've ever seen him in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, basically, anytime I see Harry Dean Stanton in anything, I'm like, this movie is 15% worse if he's not in it. Just, like, across the board, always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's not in this a ton, but there is a scene where they're just like it's like after shooting a scene, and Laura Dern asks him a question, and he doesn't answer the question. He talks about like 3 different things.
He
where
goes
he's
off on, like, non sequitur.
He's just talking
Yeah.
about like taking care. I love dogs. I love taking care of animals.
Dogs and rabbits, yeah.
And it just holds on him. That's a great fucking moment in this movie.
And then he asks for money, and that's like
he asks for money.
And then the gag comes back. And I think that you said that there is some intentional humor in this movie. I think that is that thing with the money is an intentional joke in this movie, because when it happens again, I was like, that's funny as fuck.
When he just looks at Justin Theroux.
Yeah. Oh, well, so we get it paid off. We get the rule of 3 with this one. Because basically he asks Laura Dern, he does this whole non sequitur thing about like dogs and rabbits and shit. And then he ends his little ramble by being like, could you spare a couple of bucks? I have this goddamn landlord. Which, like, also just a great line. And she's like, oh, sure. And she hands him a few dollars. And then he just turns and looks at Justin Theroux and is just silent until Justin Theroux's like, oh fuck, okay, I gotta give him a couple bucks too. But then later he's sitting on set, and there's like all the PAs and like the sound, like the grips and people around him, and they're all giving him money.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, they're all handing him bills, and he says the same line that he says to Laura Dern, which is like, thanks, time was I could pull myself up by my own weight, like, I'm temporarily embarrassed is kind of the vibe that he has. And he's saying the same thing to all the like grips and stuff who are handing him bills. It was really making me laugh. I think that might be the same scene where David Lynch has a voice cameo.
Yes, it's me, David Lynch as Bucky J.
This is easily...
Do you want the light lower? How low do you want it?
Easily,
he's sort of doing a slightly different voice.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a voice or just the effect, like the sound effect, because he's, but it sounds slightly different than just Lynch's normal voice.
It's so fucking funny.
Yeah.
This moment of this movie really made me laugh. And it exists for no other reason in the movie other than to be a funny joke, But Jeremy Irons just needs this light lower, and this guy, this guy Bucky, voiced by David Lynch, just cannot take instructions from the director whatsoever. He's like, "Did you want it lower?" And I love Jeremy Irons' annoyed acting in this scene where he's just like, "Fucking god damn it, this guy." It's so funny. It's so awesome. Yeah.
So the thing we missed from the table read is
the big
Harry
thing.
Dean Stanton says he sees someone, and Justin Theroux gets up to go look and wanders around backstage and wanders back to this house set and starts looking in the house but can't see anything.
Yeah, and then
Did you know this was going to come back?
I didn't. I did not.
Because this movie does a couple sort of tropey things with some of its reveals.
Yeah.
Where horror short stories or surreal horror movies sometimes do.
Urban, even it like some of this feels very like urban legendy.
Yeah.
Not the movie Urban Legend,
Yeah.
but like it feels like stuff that you would hear like repeated on a playground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and then she's looking at herself. She realized she was looking at herself in the past, like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it's a credit to, I think, how well Lynch directs this thing. That anytime those moments came up, I wasn't predicting them.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like they were cheesy or hokey.
Yes, I think he does a really good job about deploying tropes in this movie in a way that also like kind of deconstructs the trope, where he's like, oh, here's a thing you might see in a horror movie, but he does it in a way wwhere you're like, what the fuck? Like I recognize the shape of that thing, but you've colored it in with something that is now making it totally read differently. And I think he does that very effectively throughout this movie. But yeah. Also, when that happened, I was just chanting, "The empty man, the empty man, the empty man, the empty man."
Yeah.
Because you know.
Well, and at the end when Laura Dern walks into the hotel room with the Polish girl,
Yes.
I was like, oh, he's been planting seeds for this the entire movie, and I didn't put the dots together.
Yes.
And like, it seems so simple and obvious, but he kind of pulled a fast one on me with
Yes. Yeah. He really. Yeah. He even has the audacity to use the word mindfuck in this screenplay, and I think that in and of itself is kind of like him acknowledging, like, I'm deconstructing the tropes of the type of movie that people call a mindfuck, right? He's kind of just being like, okay, yeah, like, yeah, I've been doing this shit since the 70s, you know, now it's the aughts, and now this is an established type of story where it's like, oh, it's a puzzle box for you to figure it out, right? And I feel like he is intentionally kind of like pointing at that and being like, yeah, I can play with those toys, but what you're going to get out of this is not going to be like the butterfly effect. It's going to be something distinctly Lynch and singular.
Yeah.
You know. Anyway. Yes, Justin Theroux finds nothing. He goes back to the table. The main stuff here that we have to cover before shit gets less linear is basically like, it's clear that in the world of the narrative that of Nikki being like starring in this movie, her and Devin kind of start an affair, right? And there's the scene where he asks her if she wants to get dinner after the shoot, and there's like a big kind of drawn out thing with her trying to decide, like, should I do this? Should I not do this? And she ultimately is going to go through with it. And then we also have seen her husband, who is also Polish, Nikki's husband, who is Polish, threatening Justin Theroux.
Yeah.
And I really like that scene. This actor who plays her husband, I didn't know him from anything else.
No.
But he's very, very good in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As they're continuing to film, the scenes that they have together, there's a lot of moments where they're speaking in this like Southern accent that the characters in the movie are supposed to have.
Yes.
And other than that, the moment where Laura Dern is like, oh, this sounds just like our script.
Damn, this just sounds just like dialogue from our script. I love the delivery of that.
Yeah. The movie's never clear on what is happening for real and what is being filmed.
Yes, and there are moments around here, like around when she says that, where Nikki is sometimes calling Devin Bill, which is his character name, and sometimes he's calling her Sue.
Yeah.
And it becomes unclear whether the names actually mean, like, whether Sue is the character or whether Sue is Nikki. It gets all fuzzy.
Yeah. And I think that scene when she says that, oh, this is just like dialogue from our script, that's more Lynch acknowledging and making it clear that lines in reality are starting to be blurred.
Yes.
Rather than like sort of trying to establish any sort of cohesion,
right?
And make it concrete, like when reality is being blurred and when it isn't. It
right.
is just like
it reinforces the dreamlike quality of the rest of the movie rather than breaking it. Right? It's basically like, it's sort of a moment where when you're dreaming, when you realize you're dreaming is sort of what that moment is in the movie. It's kind of the character becoming self-aware that she's in a movie that doesn't make sense, you know?
And there's the sex scene with the blue light and the tight close-ups and the blurry images, and her husband sees this, but again, like it's not really clear what is actually happening and what isn't, and I don't think that's the point.
And in the sex scene, she is calling him Bill and he's calling her Sue. And then at the end, she's like, I'm Nikki. And she starts being like, don't you recognize me? I'm Nikki. Which is like also just very, this is also just the, I want to ask you.
Yeah.
Did you find this movie scary?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, me
And
too. Me too.
I say that because what does scary mean?
Right.
I felt an unshakable sense of dread for the entirety of the runtime of the film.
Yes.
Is what I'll say.
Yes. Scenes like this one, I think, are responsible for sustaining that feeling, right? Because not every scene in this movie is totally soaked with dread and is completely ominous. Otherwise, it would get boring because it's 3 hours long. So you need peaks and valleys. This sex scene is one of the scenes in the movie where I was like, my asshole was clenched. I was just like, I am so full of terror and dread, and I cannot possibly fathom what is going to happen next. And I'm both excited for it, and also I'm like, should I be watching this movie? Like, is it gonna like fuck me up? You know?
I had my phone to take notes, which like I really tried not to take too many notes. I wanted to stay engaged with the movie.
Yeah.
But there were points where I would pick up my phone to go on social media or something while the movie was playing, not because I was bored necessarily, but it was just like, I need a breath of air.
It's almost
from this like oppressive atmosphere of
yeah,
this film.
The movie at times is almost difficult to keep watching because it is so oppressive, I think is a great word. And this sex scene is one of those moments because you get the POV of, because her husband walks in and sees them under the covers and nothing really happens, but you get the POV of the tracking shot going down the hall and into the room and seeing them under the blankets, and it like very clear cinematic language telling you someone else is now here before you actually see him. And that very slow shot, just going into the room and hearing their voices get louder as this presence approaches, was one of those moments where I was like, I almost can't handle continuing watching this. Like it's really very, very frightening.
And there's a lot of abrupt cuts in this movie, a lot of abrupt shifts in tone where like a character will disappear, we'll suddenly cut to a different scene, we'll have a loud sound, cut to something quieter, like all over the place. He's really playing with these abrupt shifts in atmosphere and tone in a way that sometimes feels like a jump scare.
Yes.
But
so, there are multiple, I think, real jump scares in this movie. But I think you're so on edge that even stuff that isn't played like a jump scare sometimes still gets a little bit of that out of you.
Even when stuff is fun and funny or offbeat, like when when we're dancing to do the locomotion, there is still this like unease of like, I don't know what is going to happen next, and I don't know when it is coming.
Yes.
And
right. And I don't know if when it comes, it's going to be something else fun like the locomotion, or whether it's going to be the single scariest image I have ever seen in my entire life.
Is that Laura Dern's face?
Yes! Yes! Are you fucking kidding me? That's the scariest thing anyone's ever put in a movie.
But she's such a lovely lady.
The way, yes, specifically her deformed
She's so
face
beautiful.
at the end, yes. Laura Dern looks lovely in this movie. She's a beautiful woman.
But her deformed face superimposed on a creepy Polish guy
is the scariest fucking thing I've ever seen. It is so scary. It's so scary.
I think we're getting to that point where we're just like, we're in the surreal, the very weird surreal portion of the film.
Basically,
now.
After the sex scene, we sort of detach from reality.
Yeah. This all really starts with the story that she tells of like, she was picking up groceries in an alley and then wandering into a door.
You know what's the thing that I think is really funny?
Yeah.
She says, I parked in the alley because there's always parking there.
There's always parking there?
When we see the alley, she's just kind of like, her car is just kind of diagonal in the middle of like the most decrepit and hideous alley you've ever seen. And I'm like, there is not parking there. You just pulled your car into a place where you're not supposed to park.
Right.
There's always parking there.
She wanders to a door labeled with some letters, AXXON.
Yes, which is also
and the letter A.
At the beginning of the movie, they also say there's a voiceover that says like AXXON is or Axon or whatever is the longest running radio drama. You know, so this is just another one of those things that he's like deploying multiple times throughout the movie.
Yeah. We'll talk about that a little bit more. I have thoughts on that.
All right.
But basically, she wanders into a door and realizes that she's backstage on the set.
Yep.
And she's in the house that Justin Theroux was looking in.
She was the empty man all along.
Yeah.
Sorry, I shouldn't keep referencing the empty man. Nobody's seen that movie.
I've seen that movie.
You've seen that movie.
But now you spoiled the Empty Man for people who haven't seen the Empty Man.
That's true. It's still worth seeing because that spoiler doesn't even really give you an idea.
But
of what
it's like I said, it's a commonly done spoiler. Like I'm sure there's a fucking scary story to tell in the dark. I'm
Or
sure there's
someone's
a story
watching
where
themselves.
someone watching themselves through a window.
You know,
The close-ups. I want to say this: the close-ups on Justin Theroux looking through this window, and there's like fingerprints and smudges all over it.
It's
This is
super
really
grimy. Yeah.
It's such an unnerving close-up in this film.
Yeah, this whole sequence with her going through the door in the alley and basically going back to her own past is another very, very tense and scary sequence of this movie. This is also the Phantom shows up here. Is it the Phantom or is it her husband? It's the Phantom in this scene. There's a guy in the window who she keeps seeing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And he's like watching her and is aware. So she is in her own past and she knows because she was there the first time that Justin Theroux is going to come looking for her. So she takes off, but then she's looking behind her and she doesn't just see Justin Theroux. She also sees another guy watching her. So there is like someone who is aware of her being in this place that she shouldn't be, which is just such a scary idea that you're somewhere that you shouldn't be and there's somebody else there who you've never seen who like is clearly like watching you, you know? It's all very scary.
Yeah.
And I like the shot of Justin Theroux through the window too. Yeah, it's freaky shit.
Yeah.
And this is also the part of the movie where I got up and did a little dance because the movie was making me so happy because this is a horror story where someone like goes through a door and the door takes them to a moment in their own past from the story. As we've said, well-established trope. It's also one that I severely fuck with. So I was just like, yes, dog. David Lynch creepypasta. Fucking give it to me more. David Lynch's Empty Man. Let's fucking go. I was having a great time. Yeah.
This is the point where a movie becomes very hard to talk about.
Yeah.
'Cause now it's just stuff happening.
Stuff happens. There is a group of women who make themselves known to Laura Dern. They show up in her house. Her house also goes from being a mansion to being the house that is in the set in the movie.
Yeah.
So, like, when we say her house, when she has sex with Justin Theroux, that's on the movie set house. That's not in the mansion. And
Right.
So the location also kind of is
this movie we've made dream comparisons a lot, which comes up a lot in David Lynch's work.
Yeah.
This movie is when you're trying to explain a dream to someone and you say like, I was in my house, but it wasn't my house.
Yes.
That's that for 3 hours.
Totally.
Or like, I was me, but I was like out seeing myself, like outside of my body. Like he's so good at capturing those shifts in perspective, the way that dream logic works while you're experiencing the dream, and then feels totally illogical 5 minutes after you've woken up.
There are parts of this movie that have that effect on you, like while you're watching it, where a scene will end and another scene will start, and they seemingly don't have very much to do with each other narratively, right? Maybe thematically or whatever, but like there's not really like much of a narrative thread that you can hold on to. And it has the effect of then at points during the runtime of this movie, I was thinking about like, what happened 2 scenes ago? Do I remember?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, and it's very impressive that the movie manages to pull that off and kind of makes you feel like you are dreaming while you're watching it. Yeah. Where you're just like, oh, like I can sort of grasp at like the idea or the feeling of what I just went through 20 minutes ago, but I don't know if I could like tell you what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, there's this group of women who are recurring characters for acts 2 and 3 of this movie. The latter 2 hours of this movie, these women are around.
Mm-hmm.
Their names all end in I. Nikki's name also ends in an I. I don't know if that's important. It's just a thing I noticed.
It's Nikki and her girls.
Yeah. They are all, when they're introduced, they're all talking about their relationship with some man or some men. It's sort of unclear whether they're all talking about their own experience with a different man or if all of them had an experience with the same man, right? It seems like it might be Justin Theroux, but also maybe it isn't. But what they're saying is basically, you know, I did what he wanted. I spread my legs for him. And they're all kind of talking about how he then abandoned them, wronged them in some way. I think this is very interesting.
Well, they also ask her, like, did he do that thing that he does
Right.
when he's, like, that shaking thing when he,
Yeah.
So it's implied that they know that Laura Dern has slept with whoever this man is.
Right.
But whether it be Justin Theroux or someone else.
Yeah.
Yes, I think this is very interesting, too. Go ahead and say what you're going to say about it.
I was just saying, like, I just think that they are kind of, it almost feels like a Greek chorus at points in this movie where it kind of feels like they're, because the purpose of a Greek chorus in Greek theater is to, some of it's exposition, but a lot of what the purpose that they served was to make the emotion, make the feelings of the protagonist bigger by having more people, more voices contribute to telling that person's story, right? And it kind of feels like that's their purpose at points in this movie, is like they're sort of a group that collectively elevate the feelings that Nikki is feeling, right? It's just it's an interesting, they serve a very interesting function in this movie, I feel like, you know.
Yeah. With this part of the movie, things get a lot more fractured and surreal. So, like, I think we can sort of talk pretty loosely about themes and stuff and go through this portion of the movie differently. So, like, this movie has a lot to say about violence against women.
Yes.
Overall. I'm the first person in the world to have noticed that about Inland Empire.
Or about a David Lynch project. David Lynch projects, on the whole, mostly about violence against women.
I was thinking the exact same thing, and I'm glad that one of us said it.
Yeah. Novel observations from the greatest movie ever made podcast. David Lynch writes stories about women having violence perpetrated against them.
I sort of see this movie as also being about how society views violence against women and how society treats that, and that includes women treating other women who have experienced violence. And I see a lot of interesting reactions across that spectrum with the group of women in the house that recur throughout the movie, where at times they mock her, at times it seems like they're comforting her, they're her friends, she's celebrating with them, and then at the end of the film, when she's stabbed with the screwdriver on Hollywood Boulevard, they all turn away and abandon her and ignore her.
Yeah.
And I think I brought this up during Be My Cat. I was reminded of, like, the Kitty Genovese murder, of just, like, people witnessing her assault and murder and doing nothing about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, every time they show up, there's always something different and new that David Lynch is doing with how he's shooting them and how they're acting. and how Laura Dern's reacting to them. There's such an interesting element to this movie that I haven't quite fully parsed yet, but I sort of think it is something about how not only does patriarchy and patriarchy influenced views on violence against women hurt women, but how women perpetuate that
Right.
by living in a society like that.
Yeah. In the same way that like misogyny hurts men too.
Yeah.
It's like also the flip side of that coin is like misogyny also needs women to participate in it for it to continue existing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's an interesting take. I hadn't really thought of that consciously. I think that was maybe I was getting feelings and vibes that sort of coalesce into into that idea, but I like the way you put it. I was also thinking a lot about Be My Cat, a film for Anne when I was watching this movie. I don't know, you mentioned it. I don't know if you were actually thinking about it while watching the movie.
I was.
Yeah. It's sort of, it almost feels like a spiritual sibling to that movie in a way. Or I guess vice versa, because this came out first. But it's like, you know, I wouldn't be terribly surprised if I learned Adrian Toffe was a fan of David Lynch's works. And there's just like also so much of like the not just how society treats women or how society perpetuates misogyny in this movie, but there's also a lot of like how that is specifically relevant to the entertainment industry in this movie, which I think, like, you know, go back and listen to our Be My Cat, a Film for Anne episode for more of my thoughts on that. But yeah, and also just like the way that a lot of the men behave in this movie was also just like reminding me of thematic stuff that I also saw in Be My Cat. I just feel like a lot of it is just focused on like women being put in a position where they have to they know that men are a danger, or a specific man is a danger to them, but their options are limited in how they can respond to that. Right? Like the world has imposed boundaries on them that aren't just like shoot him with a gun, which, spoiler alert, is how it ends at the end of this movie. I kind of think, just to tie up my perspective on this thematic thread, I kind of think the end of this movie is a little empowering. And I sort of get the vibe from the end of this movie that like the moral of the story is kill your abuser. Which is a viewpoint that the Greatest Movie Ever Made podcast fully endorses. Kill your abusers.
If anyone needs recommendations on guns, I have a lot of gun shorts saved that I can send you.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know.
Anyway.
That's probably all I have to say about that. But it's just an interesting thing that you brought up. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like there is more to say about it too, but like I feel like there's other places where we can talk about that.
Yeah, if it comes back up, it'll come back up.
But I think the other thing that's happening is her living in the house with her husband.
Yes.
In an area that is the actual Inland Empire.
The titular Inland Empire. The worst place in the United States that I have ever visited is the Inland Empire of California. It's dog shit.
I've never been there. I didn't
bad.
know anything about it other than it was the name of the movie.
Yeah.
And the hardcore band Big Ass Truck is from the Inland Empire. Which they say in their first song ever, entitled Big Ass Truck.
Yeah.
They're a hardcore band that sings about trucks. It's cool.
I listened based on your recommendation, I think. I know I listened to the NASCAR one, but I'm pretty sure I also listened to Big Ass Truck. Anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, I've never been there, so I don't know anything about it, but it does look shitty.
Yeah, it's like
awful.
It's the shitty bad part of California. It's basically like, have you ever been to West Texas?
I've driven through Texas.
Okay, so just imagine the worst parts of Texas that you've driven through. It's that, but in California.
Yeah. Okay.
And the thing that makes it worse than West Texas is there are more people. It is a more densely populated version of the worst. Just the worst scenery, the worst pollution, the worst architecture. All of it is just fucking dog shit. If you are listening and you live in Sacramento, apologies, but also, you know I'm right.
So she's living in the Inland Empire in an abusive marriage with her husband.
Yeah.
And there's various scenes of like all the Polish guys coming over for hot dogs, which we can talk about. But one thing I want to dial in on here, I think this ties into the Rabbits sitcom, is I think this movie is about domesticity and
Yes.
about the horrors of suburban life,
Yes.
specifically from the perspective of women.
I think the thing that this movie is the most textually about, in my opinion, is domestic violence. Yeah, I think so.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's sort of brought to the forefront specifically with the scenes with Nikki in the Inland Empire house with her abusive husband, and him getting ketchup all over his shirt.
Yeah. Which was funny.
The thing is,
And then
we're
he
balancing all
says-
this really heavy shit with a bottle of ketchup just fucking fully erupting on this dude.
Oh, then when all the Polish guys walk in, there's a couple of them that are just carrying objects.
Yeah.
And there's a guy in like a weird like stovepipe sort of hat holding rope.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, it's Log Lady's distant cousin, Rope Guy. There's a guy with like bowling pins. There's a guy with like a star pinwheel. And they're
Yeah,
just
well,
all show up and
My name is Slavov. My main thing is rope. I used to be really into bowling, but right now my main thing, the thing that I am mostly doing right now, is rope. I learned how to tie many types of knots. I experiment with various types of rope. So for all your rope needs, Slavov, I live in Bakersfield. You come see me. I hook you up with whatever rope you want.
my rope has a message for you.
And you're not gonna like it. The barbecue scene is very funny. One of the most
I also like how her husband says, "Here, have hot dog."
one of the most fucked up things I've ever seen is his plate has 2 bare hot dogs, no bun, no condiment, 2 bare hot dogs on it, and he is just eating one of these hot dogs nude with his fingers.
I've done
and
that.
I'm like, yes, I've
done that.
No, okay,
Okay,
here's the thing.
okay. I've done that too. The other thing is these hot dogs do not look good. They
No.
are like barely cooked, if
Yes.
at all. They are like pale and flaccid
Yes.
and disgusting looking.
They don't look good. The other thing, my man, I too have eaten a nude hot dog. Who amongst us, living in America, has not had a nude hot dog with no bun at some point in their life? However, that is an act of shame that you should undertake in the privacy of your own home. And I get that he's in his own home, but this is a barbecue, motherfucker. You invited your boys over. You're outside at the grill. You're not hunched over your kitchen sink like a little goblin eating a nude hot dog. You're like proudly doing this with a paper plate. And I'm like, that is fucking psycho shit. Like, you can eat a nude hot dog. You just have to make sure nobody else ever sees you do it.
Yeah, the paper plate really
You can't be doing that.
really like solidifies it. That's just too much.
You can't be doing that.
I would feel better if he was eating them out of the package from the fridge, you know?
Right. If it's 2 a.m. and you're like, you still up and you stoned or whatever, and you're like, okay, what do I have? What's the food? Oh, there's this package of hot dogs, and you're eating cold hot dogs out of the package. Totally acceptable for you to do, once again, in private. And that's more respectable. That I would be like, I relate to this. I cannot relate to this guy at a barbecue just chowing down on finger dogs. You know what other scene I like? Sorry, you look like you were going to say something.
No, go ahead.
You know what other scene I like?
Yeah.
The one where the lady is in the police interrogation room.
Mhm.
We were talking about the faces in this movie. This guy,
Yeah,
this cop.
This looks like those pictures that people were posting where it's like seeing Oppenheimer in IMAX in the front row. That's what this guy's face looks like.
I really wish I could have seen this movie on a big screen just to see this dude's entire face fill a movie theater. This guy has one of the best faces I've ever seen. Just such a face, such a head. This guy has a fucking ham hock for a head. He's got a fleshy basketball sitting on his shoulders. Probably bigger than a basketball. He's got a beach ball. Real dome on this guy. And he's talking to this woman who it seems like she is in some kind of combination of in distress and also under suspicion for something. So he's kind of treating her gently but also cautiously. And she basically admits to him that first of all, she's like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Like, I don't really understand my own behavior. It seems like does she say that she was hypnotized? She does.
She does.
Yeah. She said she was hypnotized to kill someone. And she said that she stabbed them with a screwdriver. And then she lifts up her shirt and she has a bandage wrapped around her torso. And she unfurls the bandage and the screwdriver is stuck in her side. And this guy's just looking at it like, fucking, I gotta deal with this, I guess. This is gonna be so much paperwork. And I like this scene. It's good. It's just one of the ones in the in the mix here.
She comes back throughout the movie.
She does.
I sort of occasionally got her mixed up with the Lost Girl. And that's one of those things where like it could or could not be intentional casting choice that because I do kind of think that like the characters in this movie are, if anything, like ideas and archetypes and abstractions.
Right.
So who is who doesn't matter so much.
Right.
In a way, like the Lost Girl and Nikki/Sue are sort of the same.
Yes. Yeah. I sort of think that to some degree, almost all of the women in this movie represent women. Right? Like, it's like they are individual characters, but I also feel like the women in this movie, the experiences that they have are sort of intentionally, textually shared experiences. Yeah.
And even the men, like with the way the women are describing these sexual encounters that they've had, it's unclear who they're talking about.
Right. And if it's all the same guy or all different guys, because guys are kind of interchangeable.
It's like
yeah.
Justin Theroux and her husband and the Phantom, they all are maybe sort of the same.
They're all
character.
kind of the same guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think this is about very much about domestic violence and about like cycles of abuse.
Yes. Yeah.
And the way that the link that's created between perpetuating these cycles through society and shit like that. It's a hard movie to talk about, and I'm having difficulty.
The lady who with the screwdriver in her side, she also, in this kind of second act section, she appears again when Laura Dern goes to the mansion, but it's a mansion that they were shooting the movie in, not the mansion that she lives in.
Yeah.
And she goes to the mansion, and there's this the woman with the screwdriver is there, without the screwdriver, but there's a child there, right? And
if she's without the screwdriver, she just woman.
She's just woman. In this case, she's woman with child, not woman with screwdriver. I prefer woman with screwdriver. But Laura Dern is like, oh, I'm sorry, like I was looking for Billy or and so then Justin Theroux walks in and she just like starts professing her love to him. And he's like, you can't be here, like I'm with my family. And then the wife, who is the screwdriver lady, gets up and slaps her in the face a bunch of times. I really like this scene too. It's just like it's very moody. It's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my favorite scene, these scenes are kind of the whole movie for me.
Yeah.
Are the scenes where Laura Dern is upstairs in this shitty, dingy apartment talking to this guy, and she's in that southern accent relaying stories of sexual assault, and it eventually comes back that this is like this apartment is like above a nightclub that she visits at the end of the film.
Yeah.
And you were talking about dudes with faces.
Yes.
This is the MVP of the dudes with faces in this movie, because he has two lines. He has one line, like a question that he asks her, and it's so innocuous that it doesn't really like matter. And then he has a line when he answers the phone later, which is just like, hello? Yes. No. And his glasses are a little skewed, and he's just looking at her as she recounts various stories of sexual assault in like unbroken takes that just hold on Laura Dern acting, barely blinking, telling these horrifying stories. These are my favorite scenes in the movie.
I'm trying to do it to you right now.
I know.
I fucked up my glasses to try and look more like the guy that David's talking about.
Yeah, and they got like one light on the table.
Every time they cut back to him, I was just like, fucking David Keith Lynch, MVP, greatest filmmaker of all time. The guy with his glasses askew, the one lens is like acting as a reverse magnifying glass where it makes part of his face look smaller, and so it breaks up the line of his face. It's just such a captivating image. You're like, what the fuck is this guy thinking? He's a total brick wall. You can't get anything out of him.
Yeah.
And I was just like, yeah, 100% agreed. These scenes make the movie. The scene where she's talking about the guy who assaulted her. She's talking about like she survived a rape attempt by gouging the dude's eyeball out.
Yeah.
And then like trying to pull his nuts off.
I think that might be the first.
It's
like,
the first one.
First one, yeah.
That I talked about earlier. The Grace Zabriskie scene was the moment that this movie got its hooks into me. This scene is like the moment in this movie where the hooks did the Hellraiser thing, where it stretched my body out, and I went, Jesus wept. It is it's really fucking good shit. It's Laura Dern is giving an amazing performance here, and the story is so harrowing, and the guy's reactions are so inscrutable, and everything that the movie has given you up to this point kind of lands with this like huge thematic boom when she starts saying the quiet part out loud and talking about like, men have assaulted me, men have like harmed me, right? And it's like, until this point we've been dancing around that idea. We've been like, men hurt women, but we're kind of representing it in a in sort of a abstract impressionistic way, right? And it's like, then in these scenes she's like, this fucked up shit happened to me, and I'm going to describe it to you in like excruciating detail. And I just think it's the moment where the movie has like set up the nail, and like the hammer comes down on it.
Yeah. The thing about these stories is sort of like what you were talking about, how you can't exactly remember what happened a couple of scenes ago.
Yeah.
There's something that happened to me while watching these, and this is true of a lot of the dialogue scenes in this movie, where I can't necessarily remember what she said 4 or 5 lines ago.
Yeah.
It's also like it's also clear that she's maybe more in like the Sue character as opposed to being Nikki, because there's a lot of slang. She's saying fucking a lot. Like,
she's got the deep Southern accent.
Very, very like a regional kind of that in that way. Anyway, I'm hanging on every word that she's saying, but also kind of constructing them all together becomes difficult.
Yeah.
But I am captivated during these scenes, and there's as far as like this guy who's just looking at her completely inscrutable. It's like the Kuleshov effect. Like he just, every time David Lynch cuts back to him and he's just looking on with like this blank dead expression, it informs the shot before it and the shot after it so well.
Yeah.
Every time he cuts back to this guy, and you just can't tell what he's thinking or what he's going to do. It reminds me of how difficult it is for a woman to share the story of being raped because of how society is going to treat her, or how a man is going to treat her.
Yeah.
Is he going to be comforting and understanding? Is that comfort and understanding just a ploy for him to become manipulative and abusive?
Right.
It is like, it is the fear of speaking out encapsulated in one character and
Right.
one scene in one moment.
Right. And it's like being quiet about it is sometimes a defense mechanism, because it's like, it's not because it's like, oh, I feel like I can't share this. It's like, if I do share this, I don't know how it's going to be received, and maybe potentially, to your point, like used to re-traumatize me. Yeah. Deeply affecting stuff in these scenes. Also, I just love that it's like in the last hour of this movie, we're spending increasingly more time in scenery that kind of reinforces the mood and the atmosphere, where it's like we're leaving mansions and even suburbia and increasingly in like dilapidated, rundown, like abandoned urban architecture.
You could cut 20 minutes out of this movie that's just Laura Dern walking in dark hallways.
But why would you?
No, I love it.
Yeah, no, it's great.
It's so arresting and like captivating every time it happens.
Can I tell you what I was thinking of in many of those scenes? Many of those very tense scenes of Laura Dern or the camera navigating these very grimy, dark hallway locations.
If you say the word Skinamarink, I'm gonna kill you on this podcast.
Well, I guess it's time for me to die, baby. Kyle Edward Ball's Skinamarink, best movie of 2023. There, genuinely, not doing a bit, although I did plan on bringing that up because I knew it would annoy you. Genuinely, the thing that this movie does is the thing that movie does that I love so much.
Yeah.
Where it's like, because of the digital artifacts in the standard def video that this was shot on, and the darkness that is imposing on so many of the images late in this movie, there's moments where you're like, do I fucking see something there or do I not? And it's not clear. Even earlier, actually, in the Rabbits sitcom, there's a window behind them because they're kind of in like a typical sitcom suburban home set, right? There's a window behind them. And constantly when they're showing the Rabbits footage, I was honed in on that window because there's like digital noise because it's so far back in the frame. It's so far away from the lens, right? That you're like, is that just digital stuff dancing around in there? Or is there somebody in that fucking window? You know? And I could never tell. And that happens so many times in this movie where it's just like, is this a digital artifact? Is it a ghost in the frame? Or is there a fucking dude watching her? You know? And it's like, I feel like it gave me the feeling as a viewer of what it is like to be her in this movie, where it's like, why are all these fucking men staring at me all the time? And is that man staring at me or is he not? You know?
Well, and the other thing I'll piggyback off of that is like so many locations in this movie sort of start to blur together.
Yeah.
And like they're less distinct as we're moving through all of these dreamlike sequences. And the way that the film is shot, sometimes the first shot in a new location is not really clear exactly where we are.
Yeah.
So there are rooms in this movie that look like the Rabbit set.
Yes.
And I was sort of waiting for her to open a door and walk into the Rabbit set.
Which kind of happens.
Which sort of happens.
It kind of happens.
She doesn't come face to face with a rabbit, but that's sort of what it seems like the movie's leading up to at the end, and then she walks into the hotel room in Poland.
Yes, but when she opens the door and we see the Rabbit set where the door opens and the light pours through, I think it's the cinematic language there is pretty clear.
Yeah.
That she is walking into the room in Poland and she's walking into the Rabbit set. Yeah. Yeah.
Going back to since we brought up Poland.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Poland stuff in this movie.
Yeah.
I think the Poland stuff is the parts of this movie that I find to be the most inscrutable and difficult to interpret.
You mean when that lady's a ghost? That one lady who's a ghost.
Well, and even
What the fuck's up with that shit?
yeah, and the Polish guys and her husband, I don't remember his name. Sorry. Like when they give him the gun and they're all hanging around that table, but I suppose it could just be like a reflection of the women in Laura Dern's house, where it's like, no, this is like sort of the same thing, but it's all men.
Right. It's sort of like the patriarchy personified, kind of giving him guidance.
Right.
Right. It's sort of the forces of misogyny giving him a push. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
That's I think a valid interpretation. I want to. Sorry, we've been having this whole conversation. I want to watch this movie again. Are you feeling that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's just like, as we're talking about it, I'm like, I feel like I'm scratching the surface here. But I feel like there's so much more, like, especially with this Poland shit, where I'm like, what the fuck is all of that? There's points in the movie where we seem to be traveling back in time. There's the whole thing with the silk and the cigarette. The girls tell Nikki that in order to see something, right, she has to burn a hole in the silk with a cigarette. She has to be wearing the specific watch.
Yeah.
And then she looks through the hole.
And it's some sort of opening.
Yes.
It's some sort of portal or something.
And so much of then after she does that, there are many moments in the movie where the cigarette hole in the silk is then brought back and we're seeing things through it and being transported through it and stuff. And yeah, and I just feel like I need to watch this movie like a dozen more times so that I have like more of a read on that, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and this is bringing me to another idea, because now we've entered the stream of consciousness portion of the film, and therefore the stream of consciousness portion of the podcast. I think this movie is about storytelling.
Yeah.
Is about the nature of storytelling in a way that something like the Fargo TV show is to me, where so much of the dialogue in this movie is people talking about stories and telling stories.
Yeah.
Whether it's things that happen to them or folk tales or parables, and not all of them feel particularly relevant for like the overall picture. They feel relevant in the moment. Not all of them are super memorable or super easy to understand. It's sort of that sort of thing happens where like I kind of forget where we're going halfway through it sometimes.
Yeah.
But stuff like watching rabbits, the silk, the hole in the silk being used as like a portal or a window into another world. It is about watching and experiencing stories, I think.
Yeah.
And why we do it and how it informs who we are.
Yeah. And that maybe that some stories are dangerous, right? Some stories are cursed. Like the story that the German movie that they're remaking was based on, right? It's like that story is cursed. Engaging with this has consequences. I think they say a lot in the movie. Actions have consequences, right? And so I think it is about storytelling, and I think it's also about like, I think it's a little bit about Lynch being like, it's important as a storyteller to be a responsible storyteller, right? Because I kind of think some of what the movie is playing in is irresponsible. It's like the consequences of irresponsible storytelling, and that also I feel like links up with a lot of the stuff that they talk about in this movie. There's a lot of talk of secrets and hiding things. Mm-hmm. This movie is obsessed with like lies, secrets, sleight of hand and shit. And I feel like that also plays into sort of irresponsible storytelling, right? It's sort of like, it's unfair to withhold things because then you're not being honest.
Yeah, and that was something I picked up on while rewatching Twin Peaks, is how much Lynch or Frost or whoever, I mean, the development of that show is such an interesting story that it's not always clear like who's the creative force in any one given moment in the first two seasons, at least.
A true partnership, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that show is so concerned with the secrets and the double lies of these characters, and I think wants you to engage with them and love them and accept them, because that's what it means to accept a person for who they are.
Yeah.
And I think there's maybe something similar that he's playing with here in regards to that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else from like this middle? I mean, there's the shot of her walking towards the camera,
Yeah.
and that just holds on her, and then she runs at the camera, and it's scary as fuck.
It's a very good jump scare.
It's a shot that I wish I had not seen before I watched the movie.
There's a couple of those in this movie for me. The shot of her when they're filming the love scene early in the movie, where it's kind of her like looking up. I feel like I've seen that image a million times. And then I saw it in the context of the movie, and I just kept being like, "Oh, I know that the shot." And I feel like I was taken out of the movie because I had just seen the shot so many times. Same thing with this jump scare, where I was like, "Oh, this is the part that I've seen people post gifs of or whatever."
Yeah.
Weirdly, we've already talked about the demon face, so I feel like it's okay to go here right now while we're talking about this. Weirdly, with the demon face, I kind of think the fact that I had seen it on the internet a million times before made the moment, I don't know if it made it work better, but I think it worked just as well, because I immediately knew when I saw that lighting change, I was like, oh, this is the lighting where there's the picture of the thing, right? And then that entire rest of that, like the minute leading up to when the shot actually happened, I was like, my nails were digging into my palms. I was like trying so hard to keep watching the screen, even though I was so fucking terrified, because I was like, it's going to be any second now. And I feel like the anticipation almost made it, again, if not better, as good as if I didn't know it was coming at all. You know,
that for me, that moment, and I guess we'll just like start talking about the ending here anyway, and move out of like the middle portion. I think, that moment, I had forgotten that I had seen it before. So when it happened, I remembered it, and that was almost as scary as it probably would have been if I had never seen it before. It was like remembering something that you had repressed. Not like I repressed a scary image of Laura Dern's face, but it was like, oh no, I know this.
Yeah.
And then watching it slowly distort, and like the features on the face just becoming like fuzzy, blurry images as the face just sort of like almost like melts.
Yeah.
It was terrifying.
I'm gonna be seeing that on the back of my eyelids when I close my eyes tonight, probably.
Yeah.
So yeah, things are stream of consciousness, like we said, things that are chaotic, but the ending of this movie sort of coalesces when there's some of the stuff back in Poland, there's the cop interview, but all of it's sort of leading up to, we know somebody's going to get stabbed with a screwdriver. That is like, when I say that Lynch narratives are actually pretty simple when you think about them, this is what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
For the middle portion of this movie, lots of weird shit is happening that's giving you lots of feelings and ideas to poke at and interrogate. Narratively, what you know for sure, somebody's going to get stabbed with a screwdriver, because it keeps coming up. In the scene where she meets the Phantom at the house, and he comes out from behind that tree with the light bulb in his mouth, which is also very scary. She picks up the screwdriver, and it's just like another moment where we're setting this up, right? It is truly Chekhov's screwdriver.
She's walking around with the screwdriver in her hand for lots of the end of the movie before she actually gets stabbed with it.
Yeah. So she ends up going to this burlesque club. And she's saying, like, well, actually before that, it's important that before that she sees her doppelganger across the street.
Mm-hmm.
She sees another her, and she's with like the group of girls. One of them's with the group of girls. Is it her or the doppelganger? This fucking movie.
I don't know.
But then that freaks her out, and she starts running, like, looking for a place to hide. And she goes to this burlesque club and is like, somebody's trying to kill me. And then she goes in, and there's a lovely little burlesque number, because David Lynch loves to have a little bit of song and dance in his movie. And then she goes upstairs, and we see her talking to the cop with the crooked glasses. I don't think he's actually a cop. He's a guy with crooked glasses.
Yeah, it's unclear if he's a cop or what he is. But yeah.
He is just the world's best face. In the world's most crooked glasses. And then
what if a guy that you saw on your morning commute on the bus Was in a David Lynch movie.
Perfect.
That guy.
I think that's how he casts. And then that guy gets a phone call, and she starts getting freaked out. Like, I can't stay here. It seems like the phone call, maybe she's worried that he's gonna like rat her out or something. So she runs, and she ends up on Hollywood and Vine, and she gets stabbed with a screwdriver by the lady who is Billy's wife, because they were having an affair, obviously, and both of them were married.
Yeah.
So, the other woman gets stabbed by the wife here with the screwdriver. She just takes it right out of her hand and stabs her with it. And I love the shot of Laura Dern walking into the intersection of Hollywood and Vine, clutching her stomach and screaming. It's so fucking good.
Yeah, and some people are looking at her. A lot of people aren't reacting and walking by. It seems like it's probably constructed of several different shots, because you see, like, it cut to another shot and there's different people in the crosswalk and stuff. And it's really powerful. And I think ties back into that those themes of how society treats violence against women. And then she wanders into this group of seems like they're homeless folks, unhoused people. One of them is Terry Crews, and I looked at him watching this movie in dead silence on my couch for 2.5 hours at this point, and I spring up and almost fall off my fucking couch, and I'm like, Terry Crews? And I look, and sure enough, he's on the cast.
He has one line in this movie, and he fucking kills it, because what's happening here, right, is like Laura Dern collapses, and all of these homeless folks on the sidewalk are like, initially they react to her collapsing in the middle of all of them. They're like, oh, baby, you're dying. Like, you're in rough shape. And then after that, they just switch their focus back to the conversation they were already having. And the one girl is telling, like, all of these bizarre anecdotes about her friend Nico, who wears a blonde wig and does sex work and looks like a movie star and has a monkey and shit. But then at one point she's like, and she has a hole in her vaginal wall that connects to her intestine. And Terry Crews' one line in this movie is something to the effect of, "Oh, come on, baby, why are you telling us all that shit?" Like, he's so like, "Oh, fucking disgusting, vaginal wall hole, like, God." And it's like the best one-line performance in this movie. It's so good.
Well, the story about the monkey kind of ties back to Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen all of Lynch's movies, but this sort of movie sort of feels like his Sunset Boulevard, which we know he loves.
Yes, although you haven't seen Mulholland Drive.
I haven't seen Mulholland
Get back
Drive.
to me after you see Mulholland Drive. And
All
let me
right.
know which Lynch film is his Sunset Boulevard. But yes, I think there's a lot of that influence here too, right? And the monkey thing is, pointed. So then she, as they're having this conversation that's totally unrelated to her, Nikki just dies, right? And the moment with the one member of this homeless encampment with the lighter, it's like very sweet and tender and beautiful.
It's one of those strange, transcendent, beautiful moments that you get periodically in stuff like Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
That isn't really in this movie at all.
Yeah.
And then it comes back.
Yeah.
Where she's holding this lighter in front of her face while this lady is in some way trying to comfort her as she's dying.
Yeah. She's basically like, look at the light.
Yeah.
Right? And it is just giving her something else to focus on as she dies, right? And also Laura Dern vomits a bunch of blood on one of the stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, because they're on the Hollywood Walk of Fame when this happens. And I also really like that visual of her just like retching a bunch of blood onto someone's star.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. A little substance coated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then she dies. And then did this reveal have a profound effect on you?
Not exactly. I had the Wikipedia article open,
Yeah,
and I was occasionally checking it because I was getting confused about some characters, and I'm like, I want to go back and watch this movie with my phone, like, in the fucking next room, buried behind my bed where I can't get to it, and I don't have to take notes for this fucking shitty, awful podcast that we do.
Thank you for listening, by the way.
We love you guys so much. You're so supportive every week. We wouldn't be here without you.
Yeah.
Because I was sort of, I think at one point I caught a whiff of it reading ahead or scrolling through trying to make sense of things. So it didn't like blow my mind. And I think also sort of like some of the other reveals in this movie, there are plenty of breadcrumbs that David Lynch sets up ahead of time.
Right.
It's very well done. Did you like leap out of your chair when this happened?
Pretty much. Yeah. I was really, really blown away by the shot where it's like she dies and then the camera pulls out and then it pulls out far enough that you see a film camera on a crane filming her death, and like the reveal of the camera, I was like, oh fuck, holy shit, and then it continued making me go, oh fuck, holy shit, for the rest of the runtime of the movie, because then all the other actors, Terry Crews and everybody, get up, walk away, and she's still lying there, right? And I was like, so, and then she gets up, right? But it takes a moment, and then Jeremy Irons is like, that was beautiful, and this is why I think it's important that the movie kind of drops Jeremy Irons for like 2 hours.
Yeah, you're right.
And then picks him back up.
You're right.
Because him showing back up is such a like, oh wait, what the fuck? We're still in that movie that I was watching 2 hours ago. It's sort of like, it's almost like when you have a dream inside of another dream and you wake up from the one dream and don't realize you're still dreaming at first. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of like that, where it's like, oh, now we're back to reality. And it's like, no, you're still in the other dream. The other dream was just one level lower than this one. And then she gets up and she's sort of in a daze and she's like non-responsive to everybody. Until Jeremy Irons hugs her and is like, that was great. And then you sort of see her kind of come back, but she also is like, she clearly has something else that she feels like she needs to do.
Yeah, she spends the rest of this movie saying nothing.
Yeah.
She's basically like catatonic in a daze for the rest of this movie, but just sort of like jolted back awake by Jeremy Irons. And she wanders into a theater, which was mentioned in an earlier story that comes back where she's talking about like she had a son who died.
Yeah.
And she's watching the movie on the screen.
What if
like it's the end of fucking In the Mouth of Madness?
What if
something?
The ending of In the Mouth of Madness was also the ending of David Lynch's Inland Empire? It's more likely than you think.
I loved watching Sam Neill eating popcorn, watching the end of his own movie, so I thought that might be good for Inland Empire.
Yeah, I wonder. Lynch. I mean, I imagine Lynch must have seen multiple Carpenter movies. I wonder if Lynch saw In the Mouth of Madness. I hope so, and I hope he liked it. Stay tuned for our inevitable future episode on John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness.
I misspoke when I said Lynch was our third. Our first was actually Denis Villeneuve because we did Dune back to back.
That's right.
Then it was Raimi, then it was Baxley last week, and now it's
Lynch.
So Lynch is the fourth.
The esteemed repeat directors club on the greatest movie ever made.
Yeah.
So far, four white guys. We're really doing the Lord's work on this podcast, elevating the filmography of well-known white men.
Well, Craig Baxley's not well known.
That's true. 3 well-known white men and another less well-known white man.
Yeah, she watches the fucking movie.
She watches the movie, and then the movie catches up with her, and she starts seeing images on the screen that she is, and basically her eyes become the camera because you're seeing things
Yeah.
from her POV, and what she is seeing is being projected on the film screen. And I don't know what this means, much like a lot of things in this movie, but I know that I fucking absolutely love it. When this started happening, I was like, I was over the moon. I was elated. I was loving every single moment of my existence because it's just brain explodingly, gut wrenchingly powerful images for me specifically. This is a justice seeking missile. You know, really liked it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
She goes upstairs. She wanders into the Inland Empire house and finds a gun in the drawer.
Yep.
I think it's the same gun that the Polish guys gave to her husband. And she wanders around some dark hallways a bit.
Yeah.
Sees that the Phantom is stalking her. She sees the scary face, and she starts blasting.
So I started blasting. And she seemingly kills the Phantom. And its face does that melty thing that you talked about, which also is a little reminiscent of the cigarette burn in The Silk.
Yeah,
The effect on its face.
that's a good point.
Which again, I don't know what that means, but it is parallel that I noticed in this film. And then she opens the door. We already talked about her opening the door and it being the rabbit set, but not being the rabbit set. And then she goes into the Lost Girls room in Poland, and they kiss. This kiss read to me as very much like a biblical kiss. You know what I mean when I say that?
No.
So, like, there's a lot of stuff in the Bible about, like, Jesus or just other people in the Bible just kissing on the lips.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And often, biblically, like in stories in the Bible, it is used as a way to show very, very strong, like, non-romantic love or respect between people. You know? And I think that that's, like, just an older cultural thing that we in the West have sort of lost. You don't really kiss your homies on the mouth anymore like you used to. But when this happened in this moment, it kind of read to me that way, where it was like, it's not it didn't seem like a romantic kiss to me. It seemed like she was, like, just trying to give all of her everything good that she had to give this lost girl. It seemed like she was doing that through her lips. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, I get what you mean.
That's kind of how this read to me.
Yeah, this didn't read to me as romantic or sexual or anything like that either. It is, to me, it is sort of like an acknowledgement of one's trauma
Yeah.
and trying to embrace that and heal that.
Yeah.
It is like, you know, if we look at the Lost Girl and the women in this movie and Laura Dern's character as women who are representing all women and the trauma that all women go through, and the men in this movie, especially the Phantom, as the abusers who inflict that trauma upon women. It is sort of like this continuum of women, this line of women, like that cycle closing and not self-perpetuating, and like just like trying to heal and move on from that.
Yeah.
And then her time on this planet is done, and she returns to her home planet and disappears.
She disappears.
But one of those moments in this film that are rare and few and far between, where Lynch achieves the kind of transcendent, bizarre, like healing beauty of something like Twin Peaks.
Yes. We haven't talked about the music in this movie at all. The end of this movie is mostly scored with a song that Christabel and David Lynch wrote for the movie. And I think it's called like Polish Poem or something on the soundtrack. And it's just such a beautiful, it really plays into the sort of catharsis of this ending that I honestly didn't expect this movie to give us, because in a lot of Lynch movies the ending isn't necessarily hopeful or optimistic, and I kind of think this is. That my reading of this ending is that it is pretty hopeful and optimistic.
It's a pretty hopeful and optimistic ending for a very bleak and hopeless movie.
Yeah.
Like it is as hopeful as an ending can be for a movie like this.
And I think this song goes a long way to instilling that feeling because it's kind of this like ethereal dream pop, which this movie has a lot of that, right? And then a lot of this movie is scored by Lynch. Like he wrote a lot of the music in this movie.
A lot of the music has him singing too.
Yes, and I love the entire soundtrack of this movie. I think this is one of Lynch's best soundtracks in his movies that I have seen. There's like he has the jazz thing that he has in a lot of his projects, but there's also like dark ambient like drones through portions of this movie. There's like electrical buzzing, which is a audio trope that he is very fixated on. He loves the sound of electricity. And then there's also some like dream pop synthwave stuff in here as well. It's just like such a gorgeous sonic tapestry.
Yeah, I'd love to listen to the soundtrack outside of the context of the film because there's so many things that just sort of drift in and out.
Yeah,
you know, very very dreamlike that it's hard to quantify all of it. One thing that he does use a lot is this repeating beat, this like almost like a heartbeat.
Yeah,
during a lot of the hallway sequences.
Yeah,
and it is so effective at maintaining that tension and dread, and it is so simple. And like, there are parts of this movie that feel like a horror score, and this is almost like if there's such a thing as a minimalist version of a horror score for like a Blumhouse jump scare filled movie. I feel like that drum beat or that electronic beat that he uses during those hallway sequences is sort of like that being represented.
There's also a thing that I really like that happens multiple times in this movie where the music overpowers the dialogue. There are parts of this movie where the music grows so loud that it becomes difficult to hear what people are saying, and he deploys that really sparingly and specifically. So those moments always really like jumped out at me when it was like suddenly the din of the music is making it so that like the dialogue matters less. You know, it's just him as the filmmaker being like, no, the music matters more than what they're saying. You don't need to hear what they're saying. Which it's great shit.
Yeah. And there's some imagery here of like a blue stage light. There's a dancer superimposed over Laura Dern's face, and then we return to her on the couch with Grace Zabriskie looking across the room at a doppelganger sitting on the other couch.
Yes. If you were you tomorrow, you'd be sitting over there. And she turns her head and she's sitting over there and she looks happy and content.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
She's got a cute little like blue dress on. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
And it's like she sees herself tomorrow, and her vision of herself tomorrow is someone who looks more at peace than she currently is.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's why the ending of this movie is like uplifting, right? Yeah.
And then we have a fucking dance party over the credits.
We have a Nina Simone dance party.
Like it's a fucking Shrek movie.
And there's a guy
the
sawing
monkey's
a log
there
in a lumberjack costume.
And
goes there in her blonde wig.
The final line in this movie is some lady we've never fucking seen before looking dead into the camera and going, "Sweet." And that's how David Lynch ends his fucking feature length filmography.
Yeah.
20 years before his death.
And he just flips a double bird on his way out the door and is like, "Figure it out, fuckers." And that's Inland Empire.
That's Inland Empire. We've made it through the forest of Inland Empire and emerged on the other side with some bumps and scrapes and bruises.
We burned a cigarette hole in some silk and looked through, and this is what we found.
Justice.
Yeah.
We're both going to answer this.
Yeah.
What was your favorite Lynch movie before you turn on Inland Empire this morning?
Mulholland Drive.
And mine was Blue Velvet.
Nice.
With that in mind, Justice.
Yeah.
I'll ask you.
Yeah.
Is Inland Empire the greatest movie ever made? And
David,
also, maybe that question that I just asked you comes back up again.
David, I imagine that you probably have a sense of what I'm going to say here. So I'm not going to beat around the bush. Yes, Inland Empire, directed by the dearly departed David Keith Lynch, is handily the greatest movie ever made. Easily the greatest movie ever made. I was blown the fuck away by this movie. And like I said at the beginning, I'm not upset that I waited this long to watch it because I think this movie found me at the exact right moment in my life. I think this was the perfect time for me to watch this movie. It was confounding and horrifying and one of the scariest things I've ever seen and one of the most transcendently beautiful things I've ever seen. And also it's shot on digital video that by turns looks like absolute dog shit and also the most beautiful images I've ever seen. The fact that he was that talented of a director to be able to pull that off will never stop being amazing to me. I think I need to see this movie so many more times. I think I need to watch this movie again and again because like there's just so much in here that I just want to pull out and examine more. There's moments that I already am just like raring at the bit to go back to. And that's a great feeling to leave a movie with. Like it's just like this movie really fucking planted a seed in my brain. That I feel like is only beginning to sprout, and I just really want to nurture that. So yeah, dog, Inland Empire is the greatest movie ever made, and this feels weird to say with Jackie Brown so recently in the rear view because I said something similar on that episode, and I don't want people to think that I'm just like fucking some kind of movie slut that is just like throwing around, oh, this is the best movie we've covered on the podcast left and right here. But we've been on a pretty good run. We've watched a lot of fucking good movies. So I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. I think, I was just thinking about the movies we've covered. I think with future viewings, this may be my favorite movie we have ever talked about on this podcast. I don't know that for sure. I'll have to watch it more times to be sure.
You don't feel that in the moment, but you feel like
I feel like it could.
It could be.
This could be my favorite movie of the 76 episodes of this podcast. Yeah.
Respectable, but it's hard to beat Stone Cold.
Yeah, I mean... Weirdly, when I was about to say that, the one that was kind of tripping me up was Evil Dead 2.
Yeah.
Where I was like, I love Inland Empire, but do I love it as much as I love Evil Dead 2?
You can't throw on Inland Empire like you can Evil Dead 2.
You absolutely can't.
Unless you're fucking such a freak.
Also,
unless you're way freakier than we are.
Just
unless you're a fucking pervert.
Just casually watching Inland Empire.
Which I guess
while you fold laundry.
We did sort of do that this morning.
Yeah,
waking up and
as previously stated, it ruined the rest of my day and I feel insane. David, is Inland Empire the greatest movie ever made? You want me to answer this first?
What's your favorite Lynch?
Now, so this is the thing. It is either Mulholland Drive or Inland Empire.
Okay.
I think I need to see them both again. I need to, because it's been a while since I saw Mulholland Drive.
Sure.
And I feel like I am close to solidifying my feelings on Inland Empire, but I just want to get more out of it. So I think it's definitely one of those two.
Okay.
It is either Inland Empire or Mulholland Drive. And who knows? Future watches will determine which one reigns supreme on my list.
Okay.
Yeah. David, is Inland Empire the greatest movie ever made?
Justice. Yeah. Inland Empire is my favorite David Lynch movie and the greatest movie ever made.
Fuck yeah, dog.
This is just like a lovely, wonderful puzzle box of a movie.
Yeah.
And there are some movies that are puzzles that are difficult to parse on the first viewing that sometimes it feels frustrating to go back to it. Sometimes I feel like, I'm a little bit lost and I don't know where, how to make heads or tails of this movie, of a movie. And I feel that with Inland Empire, but I just feel, like you said, just like a burning desire to go back and watch this fucking thing again.
Yeah.
It is so arresting. It it dug its hooks in me right away. During the first scene with Grace Zabriskie talking to Laura Dern, I was like, is this going to be my favorite David Lynch movie?
Yeah.
And about an hour in, I was like, I think this might be, if it stays this good, it might be my favorite David Lynch movie.
Yeah.
And it did.
Yeah.
It's such a wonderful combination of all of these different artistic and narrative elements and technical elements. Everything's sort of reinforcing each other in this film, and yet, like, pulling apart and looking at those things individually and those scenes individually. They're all beautiful and wonderful and horrifying and difficult to look at, and some of them make sense and some of them don't. It's sort of like looking at like a Hieronymus Bosch painting, where some of those individual scenes and little moments throughout it don't always make sense, but you stand back and you look at the thing, and it all kind of makes sense. And it all becomes this like beautiful painting to you.
Much like Hieronymus Bosch, David Lynch also loves filling his works of art with weird little freaks.
Yeah, there's a bunch of weird guys around in this movie.
Bunch of fucking weird little freak dudes. Yeah.
Fuck yeah, dude. I loved the shit out of this movie, and I don't know that I would have said that if I had watched it at any other point in my life.
Yeah.
I was bowled over. I was this movie like blew my hair back. I don't know what to do after watching this fucking movie.
Yeah.
So yes, Inland Empire is easily the greatest movie ever made.
Yeah.
Is it one of the best on the show? Definitely. I don't know if it's like top 5 or top 10 for me. I don't think in those terms, but I was so thoroughly impressed with this film and just like in love with everything that David Lynch brought to this film. So yeah. Next week we're watching The Great Muppet Caper.
Yeah.
That's the kind of quality, diverse content that you expect from us.
Listener, you can think of the greatest movie ever made like a pendulum. We just swing in one direction, and then next week we're taking a huge swing right back the other way. Yeah, like David said, the next movie we're talking about is The Great Muppet Caper. Also, in some ways,
a frog in trouble.
A pig in trouble. In some ways, there is not that big of a difference from kind of the artistic output of David Lynch and the world of the Muppets. Lots of little weird freaks, lots of like one-off gags that don't really connect to the larger narrative, lots of huge leaps in logic that you just have to accept at face value. I feel like,
musical sequences.
Music, yes. Yeah. So join us next week to hear Hi-Ho Kermit the Frog coming back for his second appearance on the podcast.
Yes, I haven't seen this one. This is one of the Muppet films I have never seen before. So.
I did mandate to David off mic, and now I'm making this canon to the podcast, that for as long as this show runs, we will do one Muppet movie per year. And if we run out of Muppet movies... if the show runs long enough that we run out of Muppet movies, then I guess we'll start over. Just cover them again.
Do it again. Yeah, that's my rule about alien movies.
Yeah.
So join us next week with Kermit and Miss Piggy and all of the Muppets for a caper. I'm a big fan of capers.
And we'll check right into the Happiness Hotel.
In the meantime, thank you guys for listening to this very long episode about a very long and confusing movie.
Yes.
Please share the podcast with your friends and give us a like and a review and subscribe and all that shit. We're bad at this every week, but we hate trying to sell this show, but we love that you guys listen, and we would like more people to listen, so we are forced to do this.
Yes.
If I could, I would meet all of you in a Polish hotel and give you a big kiss on the lips and then disappear.
Consensually.
Next week, yeah, Great Muppet Caper. We'll see you guys then. Until then, we love
Later.
you so much. And later, dipshits.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Greatest Movie Ever Made. Please remember to leave us a rating and a review, and to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. We appreciate you supporting the show and spreading the word. Tell your friends to listen, tell your enemies to listen, tell your mom to listen. If your neighbor has an unsecured Bluetooth speaker, connect to it and play an episode. You can follow us on social media at TGMEM_podcast. And if you've got a movie that you want us to talk about, send us an email at thegreatestmoviepodcast@gmail.com.